Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto finds his parents. Scrolls part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. The village hidden in the leaves fell silent in the aftermath of its near destruction. Capable shinobi of all ranks worked diligently to put out the remaining flames and rush survivors to the hospital for treatment. Everyone working in silence, too shaken up to speak about the horror they had just witnessed. Too traumatized to even process what had actually happened. The Kyuubi, the strongest of the 9 Biju. The beast had appeared so suddenly. There was no time to prepare an adequate defense against such a threat. The monster tore through the village with ease. The shinobi did their best to save as many lives as possible, but their task seemed pointless as the Kyuubi killed faster than they could save. The massacre was only stopped when Minato Namikaze, the 4th Hokage, used his famed Hiraishin to teleport himself and the beast outside of the village. It was there that he and his wife, Kushin and Namikaze, were able to subdue the monster long enough for them to come to the decision of sealing the beast into their newborn children Mito and Menma. They both settled their resolve and were fully intent on giving their lives with the remaining chakra they had left to seal the monster away. But after a heartfelt speech from Minato's predecessor Hiruzen Sarutobi, they allowed him to perform the jutsu, giving his own life in return. They prayed he found his peace in the afterlife. Now, hours later, Minato waited outside of his wife's hospital room with his daughter in his hands. Looking down at the bundle, he grinned sadly at the red tufts of hair on her small head, imagining what she would look like in the future. Much like his wife, he presumed. Little Mito, he whispered gently. To his right, Tsunade Senju's apprentice, Shizen, cradled the other bundle. The child within sporting tufts of blonde as bright as his own. Each of them marred with 3 whisker-like marks on their cheeks, much like his first child, his 4-year-old son Naruto, whom was currently on his way from one of the civilian shelters. He was broken from his thoughts when the door creaked open. Tsunade walked out with an unreadable expression. Minato stood to his feet, fearing the worst. He pulled Mito closer to his chest as if to shield her from the news until he himself knew it first. "Tsunade-sama," he said urgently. Is she alright?" Calming him down, she took Mito from his arms. "Yes, she's fine. She'll need a few more days to recover than a normal pregnancy, of course, but she is fine." Immediately, Minato smiled and squeezed her shoulder gently as he passed, offering a quick thank you before rushing into his wife's room. Kushina was awake and staring at the ceiling. When she saw Minato, she nearly jumped up, inciting a squeak of pain in place of her planned stream of questions. Minato quickly rushed to her side, gently pushing her back down to her back whilst whispering everything's fine over and over to calm her worries. Ignoring her pain, she called out hollowly, "My baby's asking for her children." Tsunade and Shizen strolled in, rocking the 2 bundles all the way to their mother's bedside. They each placed the 2 into her waiting arms as she somehow had the strength to carry them both. Minato stood to her side, smiling at his children along with his wife. Tsunade and Shizen both smiled at the scene playing out before them, a picture-perfect family. Walking through the halls of the hospital, the 4-year-old Naruto clutched his stuffed bear to his chest. The ANBU behind him had a hand on his back, gently guiding him to his mother and father. He was quite worried as the last time he was in this place, his father's former student Obito Uchiha died. That's all he really knew about hospitals: people die inside. So if his mom and dad were here, then that meant someone was dead. His small sandals tapped loudly against the floor, directly opposing the hollow silence around. He couldn't even hear the ANBU behind him. On the way, they stopped abruptly, hearing the sound of laughter in the room to the right. "This way, young Namikaze," the ANBU directed, opening the door. Naruto looked up at him before walking in. He saw the room was filled to the brim with people he knew. There was Kakashi and Jiraiya leaning on the windowsill, Tsunade and Shizen standing at the foot of the bed, and his mother and father at the head of the bed cradling 2 bundles. He walked in but wasn't noticed. Not until the ANBU shut the door. "Naruto-kun," Kushina said weakly, trying her hardest to sit up a little more. Naruto walked over to her bedside, allowing his father to pick him up. Adjusting his grip on his son, Minato leaned him over the bed a little more. "Meet your new baby siblings." Naruto looked down at the 2 babies that shared his whisker marks in wonder. His hands rested timidly at his sides, not wanting to hurt them. He looked at their hair colors in wonder, specifically Mito's. "She looks just like Yuka-san," he said, inciting a round of laughter and ahs from the room. He looked around, wondering what he did, until Kushina brought his attention back. "That's right, she does." She smiled up at her oldest with tears brimming the bottom of her eyelids. "That's Mito." His gaze then shifted over to his little brother. "And he looks like," he paused and thought. "You," said Minato, filling in the word for his son, who looked him in the eye. "He looks just like you." Naruto looked back down at him in amusement, a small smile tugging on the edge of his lips. "Yeah, he looks like me," he whispered quieter, amazed by the similarities. Everyone around them looked at the family now in completion, smiles on their faces as they imagined the things they would accomplish in time, saving this moment in their minds for as long as they could. -5 years later, things were different now. No longer was the family as complete as they had hoped at one point. Not that they noticed. Everything was about Mito and Menma. Every day, no matter what day it was like their birthday. The villagers showered them in love and endearment for their noble sacrifice. They were worshipped and praised and now adorned the titles of the prince and princess of Konoha. Kushina and Minato were no different in their treatment of them. Whatever they wanted they got. Which is why their training began earlier than planned. Oh yes, planned? They'd had a scheduled plan for training for both of them. Everyone who specialized in a field of study had agreed to assist. The two were to begin their training as soon as they got out of the academy. They'd be placed on a team with whomever was the rookie of the year, if it wasn't one of them, and given to Kakashi. He would train them in chakra control and ninjutsu. When time permitted, they'd go to Kurenai Yahi to learn genjutsu, Might Guy for help with taijutsu, and they'd go to their mother for kenjutsu training. They'd be trained in Fuinjutsu by Minato personally. When they were ready, they'd learn Minato's Rasengan and Hiraishin and Kushina's chakra chains. After that, they'd undergo the tutelage of Jiraiya and Tsunade, whomever they decided. This was all to take place after their graduation from the academy, but after a few good hours of pleading their case with the help of their undeniable puppy dog eyes, Minato caved and they started early, 2 years ago actually. Consequently, the assistants were no longer able to uphold the plan as they had matters to attend at the time. So, they decided to handle it themselves. That was all for the two youngest Namikaze children. As for the oldest, well, it couldn't be called neglect exactly, but he wasn't much a part of the family training or any other activity they underwent. The last time he could remember doing anything with them was when he entered into the academy, and his family had to attend as his father gave the opening speech for each new class. That was the last time he could remember any amount of attention on himself. The last time he had smiled sincerely. That day, it was as if his parents just assumed the academy would eat up most of his time. As if he was no longer in need of their assistance in any matter. He would have been upset had he not found a passion for reading. It was a simple pleasure that brought him peace in times of self-loathing. When he felt like he wasn't good enough to be in the family he was in. Or when he felt it would be better for them if he was no longer around. He'd read a book. Anything with words would interest him. He'd read anything that he could find, fiction, non-fiction, ninja scrolls, bingo books, history books, everything. It was an escape from the material world for him. He's lived 1,000 lives within his young mind, he's loved and hated and understood the meaning of both in various ways. In his readings, he's learned many things. He's learned various jutsu and techniques suitable for his level of understanding. His reading brought him to his own self-made taijutsu which he has not named. After reading a book based on the various clans within Konoha, he found interest in the countless taijutsu customs of two of the greatest, the Uchiha and the Hyuga. The Uchiha style consisted of blocking and countering an enemy's attacks. The Hyuga's famous gentle fist revolved around the use of their Dijitsu the Byakugan to see the tenketsu of their opponents, using chakra to block them. Reading that got him interested in taijutsu altogether. What brought him to his own style was after he read through a medical book that he had, at one point, heard Tsunade call a doctor's Bible. He learned of various pressure points on the human form that could shut a person's body down with a few quick hits. Using that knowledge and the theory of the Uchiha and Hyuga fighting styles, he waited for a chance. Every day after the academy, he'd go to the training grounds and wait for this Uchiha kid to come train with his father, sure sway he believed. Then, he'd go to the Hyuga compound and stand on the building across the street watching, from a distance, the branch family running through their daily training routines. After trying whatever he saw, he was able to somewhat duplicate both of the styles, sloppily of course, but his taijutsu style was unorthodox and was supposed to look chaotic. Naruto's entry into the academy is what made his younger siblings want to begin their training early. Of course, caving, Minato decided it best he assist in their training personally and took a leave from office, placing his trusted friend and advisor Shikaka Nara in control of all matters not involving foreign threats, while he worked diligently on training his children. He was in charge of everything including matters of the academy, domestic complaints, ninja ranking, and even ANBU missions. Minato had expressed he did not want to be bothered unless one of the other villages randomly sent a message declaring war. True to his claim, the Namikaze family essentially entered the seclusion of their own compound. The training schedule was so tight-knit it left absolutely no room for anything. Not even the esteemed Ichiraku's ramen they were all so fond of. The Namikaze family wouldn't be seen for a long while. In the academy, a test is given to the first-year students to see who of the bunch is suitable enough for an early promotion. The test is administered 2 weeks after the start of the academy, and the results are sent directly to the Hokage for his decision. The written test covers topics taught in the 3rd year and even a few questions designed to see how they work under pressure. Questions they couldn't possibly begin to understand. Not since Kakashi Hatake has there been a student able to jump to the 3rd year. 2 years ago there were 2, Naruto Namikaze and Itachi Uchiha. The 2 young geniuses were placed in the same 3rd year class under the watchful eye of the very confused Irika Immuno. Confused as the 2 9-year-olds excelled at everything he put in front of them. Halfway through the year, he went to Shikaku requesting they be given the test early. Shikaku at first was surprised but accepted regardless. The two took the test designed to weed out the weak links and passed flawlessly. Shikaku was of course impressed and even thought of congratulating the fourth on such a prodigal son, but could never find the time. He placed the two on a standby support team as he still feared they were too young to do actual missions. They were under the guidance of a former ANBU agent named Kaijo. He trained the two as he had once trained his fellow agents, pushing them to their limits each day as they awaited a mission. After the first week, he witnessed their talent in the arts and requested they become an active assault team instead of support, but Shikaku refused as he was still timid about putting the two on the field so early. They were only 9. Wanting a second opinion, he went to the Namake's compound in search of Minato. He caught them in the middle of training. It must have been a frustrating evening as Minato seemed quite stressed. Seeing Shikaku, he immediately asked if another nation was attacking. Shikaku said that wasn't the case, which seemed to tick him off more as he angrily barked out tips to his children as they engaged in a taijutsu match. Shikaku was no longer able to get a word out as Minato turned to him, calming down a bit. "Look, whatever it is then, just handle it please. As you can see, this really isn't a good time." Before he could argue, Minato already left his side. Now, with the decision left to him, he decided to trust his gut and keep the team just a support team for the time being. A few days later, a seasoned genin team requested backup while on a C rank mission that apparently turned B due to an attack from a few low-ranking rogue ninja. Figuring it would be an opportunity to test their skills in the field, Shikaku sent Naruto's team. With Kaijo, he figured they'd be able to handle it. When they returned, he was shocked by the report. Naruto and Itachi seemed to have been the biggest hitters among the group as the two took down an A-rank rogue on their own after being separated from the others. In a joint effort, the two worked the man down until they were able to get a killing blow on the man. Their first kill. After consoling from his mother and father, Itachi was fine the next day. Naruto on the other hand had to deal with it on his own, but he handled it nonetheless thanks to his books. At that point, the two 9-year-olds of Team Kaijo became true ninja. Their training surpassed even their own expectations. Itachi leaped through every technique within his father's study, learning old taijutsu techniques, every fire-based ninjutsu, and a few techniques left behind by the clan founder Madara Uchiha. He became one of the best Uchiha, and he was only 9. Naruto too fished through his old man's stash and read up on techniques. He learned everything written on the pages in his father's study. Every fuinjutsu note, every taijutsu technique, every ninjutsu theory, even his father's main techniques Rasengan and Hiraishin. All of those techniques were now within his back pocket. After 2 more successful support missions and a heap of backing from the other senseis, Team Kaijo became a full-fledged assault team. They worked diligently for a year, racking up mission after mission, not a single failure to their record. In some of their more strange missions, they even saved princesses and killed tyrants. All in all, throughout the nations, they made a name for themselves. Word was passed around the Uchiha clan of Itachi's success within a year, and he was praised throughout the village. Naruto, however, flew under the radar. No one really praised him inside the village. There were a few minor villages that held him in high regards though, so he didn't mind. From the way Itachi despised it, he figured he wouldn't enjoy it much anyways. Now, 10 years old, Naruto had decided to move out of his parents' home as he felt bad he was taking up space and using their utilities without helping pay. He had found a small apartment in the crummy side of Konoha that he could afford, but figured he wouldn't be there often anyways. He and Itachi became the best of friends over the years. They did everything together. Naruto would even help him train Sasuke every now and then. They both excelled because of the other. Neither of them were willing to be outdone by the other, so they pushed harder and harder, trying to gain the upper hand. A healthy rivalry built on friendship. They fought constantly whenever they had the chance, always testing the other's skill to gauge their own progress. Their greatest match was later on that year during the Chunin exams held in Kumo. They faced each other in the final round and fought each other to a standstill. The battle was the most magnificent spectacle the non-shinobi viewers had ever seen. The battle of the Uchiha prodigy and the son of the Yellow Flash was a sight to see. They held nothing back and attacked each other with the intent to kill, as they knew the other expected nothing less. It was there which Naruto brought to light his father's technique, Hiraishin, for the first time, as well as a technique of his own creation. The perfect clone, as he called it. It was a clone that, with the help of fuinjutsu, was actually brought to life. While in a tough spot, he used the technique away from Itachi's view and sent the clone out to fight in his stead as he thought up a strategy. The only issue with the technique is that, much like water clones, it only holds a portion of the original's ability. It is also aware it's a clone, so it has no adrenaline when in danger. Itachi had no idea, as it even fooled his fully matured Sharingan. So, he continued to fight with the same intensity he had been and unleashed a technique he intended to use as a distraction. Although a powerful attack with the main purpose of killing, he was sure Naruto would find his way out, but to his horror, he did not. All he saw was his best friend's body hit the ground, burnt to a crisp. His heart sank as the entire stadium fell silent, believing the match to be over. The proctor dropping down to the arena to check on the body made it that much more real. He looked up to the kage box which held only the reikage and kazekage and gave a shake of the head. Everyone knew the implication of such a gesture and remained silent. Itachi's eyes burned as his heart sank. He dropped to his knees staring at the ground wondering what he had just done. He was praying to whatever god was up there that it wasn't real. His mind didn't register how much clearer the world seemed to him, or the fact that his eyes were still burning. He just couldn't think. He was brought back to reality with the popping of a clone. Looking up, he saw the proctor looking down at the spot Naruto's body had been in wonder. Itachi felt the ground beneath him rumble. He jumped back, narrowly avoiding the hands that popped out trying to clamp down on his ankles. The proctor jumped back up seeing the match was not yet over. The crowd went wild seeing the Namikaze was still alive. It was truly the greatest match in the history of the Chunin exams. Two boys, no older than the second-year students at the academy, displayed abilities on par with that of legends. The fact that they were both from Konoha stirred up a heap of commotion among the other nations. If Konoha was breeding monsters such as these, they questioned any sort of attack against them would be beneficial. When they returned to the village, the two boys were immediately granted the rank of Chunin and shortly after were approached by the ANBU captain, Kenji Horo. Captain Horo explained his interest in them joining his force even at their ripe age of 11. He went on to describe the training they would receive in stealth, which is one thing they lacked. They'd have to pass the Jonin exam first, which they would not be eligible to take for the next 2 months, but they accepted nevertheless. Of course, in normal circumstances, rank didn't matter much when making the selection, but Captain Horo figured Shikaka would be more inclined to accept the request if the two were able to prove they were on par with the higher-ups of the village. When they achieved the rank of Jonin with ease, Captain Horo brought the matter to Shikaka Nara, who was still a bit timid to allow it, but Itachi and Naruto expressed their want for such an opportunity, so he allowed it on the parameters that they were not able to take on solo missions until they turned 12. Horo agreed and they were admitted for the ANBU exams. 3 weeks later, they were members of the prestigious ANBU Black Ops. They were placed on a team with 2 other agents, Yugao Yuzuki and Hate Gecko, the captain. Through them, they learned Kenjutsu, and Naruto of course found a way to perfect the style shown to him thanks to a samurai book he had once read. Their team underwent multiple ANBU missions involving various instructions. The two 11-year-olds were thrusted into a world of bloodshed and hatred. And only one of them had the support needed to handle such a life. 2 months later. It's been a month since Naruto Namikaze's 12th birthday, not that anyone aside for his teammates knew that. He got a few things from each of them, a new jacket from Yugao, an all-black sword from Hate, and a new book from Itachi. And he even got a cake and congratulations from the Uchiha clan as a whole, which he was very grateful for. Since that day, he has been undergoing solo missions like a madman. He took 2 every week the first month and even went for 3 if his time allowed it. With the pay he received, he upgraded to a nicer apartment in the wealthier side of Konoha. It was a fully furnished condo fit with everything he needed. 2 bedrooms, a bathroom with actual hot water. His old place didn't have that, so that was a big plus. Then, there was his study. It was like a mini library with books stacked from the floor to the ceiling with barely enough room to walk. He was dressed in his street clothes, which consisted of a plain black t-shirt, black baggy ANBU-style pants, black ninja sandals and black wrap around his mid-calf. Over that, he wore the hoodless white jacket Yugao had gotten him with the Namikaze symbol proudly displayed on his back, and he left the front unzipped. The jacket went down to the bottom of his back and was long-sleeved. Like young Minato's, his headband hung loosely around his neck. Walking to his mirror, he looked at himself. His hair was as shaggy as it usually is except for the right side of his head, which was shaven down for some reason. A while back in training, he narrowly dodged one of Itachi's kunai, but it nicked the side of his head deep enough for him to need sticks. His hair just never fully grew back. Because of it, it looked as if it slouched over towards the left. His face had shed itself of its rounded shape, and instead resembled his father more than ever. His eyes had heavy bags beneath them, as it had been a few days since he had last slept. With a yawn, he stepped out of his bathroom and headed for the front door, ready to start the day. Red hair strewn across her bed, drool slipping out the side of her face, and a screeching sound from her nightstand. Mito's eyes creaked open slowly. Her bright blue eyes wincing at the sun in her face. Ugh, she groaned sitting up in her bed, stretching out her sore body. Today was going to be great. She just knew it. This was the first birthday they were going to be celebrating since they started training. Before, there was just no time for it. The most they got was one gift each year from their parents. Today would be different. Her door swung open with her brother charging in. "Mito!" he yelled. "Hurry up and get up." Ka-san said, "Come downstairs." She rolled her eyes, throwing a pillow at him for being so loud. "I'm up, you idiot." Menma snatched it out of the air and threw it back. "Looks like you're laying down, you dummy," he said, jogging out and down the hall. Mito just shook her head as she rubbed the sleep from her eyes, still trying to find her bearings. When she finally did, she rolled out of bed and headed downstairs. Rounding the corner from the living room, she was greeted to the expected big breakfast with the entire family in attendance. By entire family she meant her, Menma, Minato, Kushina, Jiraiya, Tsunade, Shizen, and Kakashi. Everyone else was at the long table already serving themselves. There was a space to Menma's right reserved for her. Taking her seat, she was greeted by everyone when their individual conversations allowed it. "Morning, Mito-chan," Kushina said happily. "Happy birthday," she said, passing her a plate. Mito gave her a quick thank you as she took it and filled it with various breakfast goodies that were prepared on the table. "So, how's it feel?" Minato asked, taking a sip of his juice. "You know, being 8 years old at last?" Mito gave him a bashful smile, shrugging her shoulder in reply. "Well, to me it feels great," Menma said. "I finally get to go to the academy," he said, excitement pouring from his mouth in the form of his noodles. "Yeah, you say that now," Kakashi informed him. "I was only there for a year, but man, was it a lot of homework." "Yup, lots and lots of books and studying. Something you haven't been too great at as of now," Sue said. Jiraiya. "Oh, you shut up, Baka Erosenin," Menma replied in haste. "He is right, you know," Kushina added. "Ninja studies probably should have been added to the list when planning. There's still another year. Maybe we can fit that in," she said. "Yeah, maybe. Then they'd have had a chance at the advanced placement test. They're already miles ahead in everything else," Kakashi said, piquing their interest. "The advanced placement test?" Mito asked. Yeah, I almost forgot about that," Minato said. "It's a test given to the first-year students that decides if they are liable for early promotion to the third-year class or not. But it's incredibly hard to do, and not many are able to do so. In fact, I believe Kakashi was the last one ever. Actually, I heard there were 2 of them just about 3 years ago," Jiraiya said. Minato was shocked by that. To think he hadn't heard of it. "Really? Yeah, I think it was Fugaku's brat, Itachi." "Yeah, he was definitely one of them," Jiraiya replied, looking up in thought. "Oh, Itachi-kun? Wow, how talented is he? We haven't seen them in a while," Kushina said. Minato raised an eyebrow in thought. He hadn't really thought about that. "It's been like, what, 2-3 years? Man, Menma and Mito's training ate up most of our time. We haven't seen a lot of people in a while. I haven't even checked up on Shikaku." "Well, that's definitely on the to-do list," he said, picking at his food. For now, he had to enjoy the day since this is the first time they were actually celebrating the joyous occasion. "Regardless, I think we'll hold off on the academics and all that. I want you guys to learn with your friends. I don't want you rushing out of your childhood so fast, lest you'll end up like Kakashi," she said, inciting a round of laughter from the table at the man's misfortune. The table then broke up into their own individual conversation, with Mito and Menma discussing who they wanted to invite to the party later on. Tsunade and Jiraiya were reminiscing old times. Kakashi and Shizen were just discussing previous missions they've been on, and Kushina was watching Minato in wonder. He seemed troubled. Reaching over, she put her hand on his forearm, rubbing her thumb across his skin. "You okay?" she asked sincerely. Snapping out of his daze, he smiled back to her. Yeah, I'm great. Just thinking is all," he said. "We've got to get back in the swing of things within the village," he said, confusing her. "What do you mean?" "Well, we've been here at the house since we began their training. The only time we've left has been when we went out to the Hokage training grounds. But when's the last time you've seen any of your friends?" At that, Kushina really had to think. It has been a very long time. She couldn't even remember the last time they've left the house. "Oh, I guess you're right," she said. "Yeah. I mean, we haven't been to Ichiraku's in ages," he joked. "Ugh, don't remind me. I'm dying to get my hands on a few bowls," she said with a smile. "But really, have we been so caught up with their training that we've just negated going out?" she asked, getting back on topic. "Well, that's gonna change today," he remarked, wiping his face as he stood up, getting everyone's attention. "Everyone, when we finish our meal, we're gonna go for a walk through the village. We've been away for far too long. We must reconnect with the people. So, once you finish, I implore you to go and reconnect with friends and whatnot," he said as they all agreed. Walking through the streets of Konoha with his prized Ika book proudly plastered in his face, Kakashi made his way towards the ANBU HQ to catch up with a few of his old teammates. He found it strange that he too had been away from the swing of the village for a while. If he wasn't on a mission, he was with the Namikaze assisting in their training. As he walked, he noticed a kid walking quite a ways ahead of him. He noticed he too was reading a book. He looked awfully familiar from the back too. Kakashi noticed the Namikaze symbol on his back. "Naruto? Where's he been?" He noticed Naruto seemed to be heading in the same direction as him, so he decided to catch up. "Hello there, Naruto," he said, not looking up from his book. Naruto had momentarily looked away to see who was there. "Oh, Kakashi and I. How are you?" he asked hollowly. "I'm fine. And yourself?" "I am well. It is strange to see you out and about." "What would be the occasion?" Naruto asked. Kakashi raised an eyebrow. "Well, it's Menma and Mito's birthday," he replied. Naruto's steps faltered slightly. "So it is," he said, looking ahead from his book, seeing the ANBU HQ in sight. "Would you happen to know if they are having a birthday party by chance?" he asked. At this, Kakashi truly seemed confused. They had been talking about it all week. Had he not heard? Yeah? Yeah, they are. He answered. Naruto nodded with his eyes on his book. I suppose I should stop by then. I'll sign in first. He said, whispering that last part to himself. Kakashi heard, however, and watched as the blonde turned to enter the building he had just been heading towards. Confusion and curiosity prodded him into following him in. Naruto noticed, but didn't find it weird as Kakashi had been ANBU captain at one point. Walking in, Naruto was greeted by the head receptionist. Welcome, Torasama. She said, passing him the forms for check-in. Good morning, Hibi-san. He replied formally. I am signing in. Please inform Weasel I will return shortly. Of course, Torasama. She replied, writing it down on a spare piece of paper so she remembered. Naruto nodded and turned to leave, giving Kakashi a brief head nod before walking out. Welcome, Kakashi-sama. She said, seeing him standing there. His eyes, however, followed Naruto all the way out the door, not paying her any mind. Confusion still wrapping his brain in a tight grip, the Namikaze family strolled through the village streets for the first time in 3 years, greeting every person that approached them. The people's admiration of the family gladly did not dwindle with their absence. They were all still adored and loved. Children passing by viewed them with wonder and awe. When they made it to the park, they had to stop and address the crowd of young fans before leaving Menma and Mito to greet their peers who were playing a game of ninja. Kushina stayed behind to watch as Mikoto had just arrived with her youngest son Sasuke. They decided to stay and chat for a bit, so Minato decided now was as good a time as any to drop in on Shikaku to check up on things. He was returning tomorrow, but he wanted to make sure there wasn't anything major to worry about. On the way, he greeted everyone individually as a Hokage should. He shook every hand and hugged everyone who offered. The exhausting journey reminded him why it was they didn't have time to walk around the village much before. Even so, he loved it. Finally making it to his office, he sighed as he stepped in. Shikaku was signing a document, and seemed to release the breath he had been holding. Oh man. Finally. I thought I was gonna be doing this forever, he said, sitting back in the chair with a sigh. Minato chuckled at the lazy man. Yeah, sorry. Not back yet. You've got one more day of it all. I just came by to check up on things. Shikaku looked at him and thought. A perplexing look on his face that didn't fully believe him. Really? He asked incredulously. After 3 years. Yeah? Well, we all got a bit preoccupied by the training and all that, so he said, dying off. Shikaku just nodded his head as if assuring him he was listening. How was that, by the way? He said, giving up on whatever slew of curse words rested on his tongue. Minato sighed at that, running a hand through his hair. As good as it's gonna get for the moment. I mean, they excel at everything mostly. Their taijutsu is good, ninjutsu is fairly well, can break out of most any genjutsu they are subjected to, and their teamwork together is good enough to land a blow on Kakashi, so that's pretty good. At everything else though, they're pitiful. Horrible at Fuinjutsu, lack the proper chakra control necessary for medical jutsu, and God, their book smarts are awful. He said, finishing his assessment. I'm really disappointed by their Fuinjutsu more than anything though. The way it's looking, either of them will ever be good enough to get the Hiraishin down. I know it's a complex seal, but I was hoping at least one of my kids could learn it. Shikaku wanted to palm his face. They have literally been living in a cave. As nice a cave it was, it still hid them from the world outside of their compound. The way he said that statement though gave a pang of hurt through Shikaku's heart though. It was as if he wasn't even thinking about teaching it to his oldest. As if he didn't even remember he had another child. His first thought was to ignore it and just let it blow up in his friend's face when the time was right, but he figured he should at least give him a little nudge. Well, what about Naruto? Minato froze completely for a second. Naruto? Yeah, he should be graduating this year, huh? Maybe he'll show an aptitude for it. Shikaku wanted to palm Minato's face. Was he that unaware of his other son's accomplishments? If he didn't even know he was no longer in the academy, then he couldn't know about his son being one of the few to pass the advanced placement test. He couldn't know about his son's alias amongst the other villages, which was based off of his own. He couldn't know of his son's unblemished mission record or the various monuments popping up around the nations with his son's name on them. He couldn't know of his son's entry into the ANBU Black Ops at the ripe age of 11. He couldn't know any of that. Where is Naruto, by the way? Have you seen him today? Shikaku asked, prodding him further into the trap he had set himself. Yeah, he was. Minato was drawing a blank. He couldn't remember if he saw his son today or not. Or if he saw him last week. Or in the last year. He tried. Shikaku watched the confusion play out across his face in wonder. It was as if he truly didn't understand the question he had been asked. Minato looked out the window, truly confused by his inability to picture his own son within the past 2 to 3 years. It broke his heart that he couldn't. Completely shattered his soul. Sitting on the park bench, Kushina and Mikoto laughed as Kushina was telling stories of the events that happened during their 3-year training period. They watched the kids playing a strange game they had never seen before involving cardboard ninja tools and a flag. It was apparent to Mikoto that Menma and Mito were well trained by the advanced tactics they were using, but she was filled with pride as she watched Sasuke, on the opposing team, holding his own. Kushina noticed as well. I see Sasuke has a bit of training as well, huh? She inquired. Ah, well. That's all his brother. Always wanting to imitate him, and what not. She said with a grin, watching him run around and laugh with the others. Kushina smiled and nodded, understanding completely. How is Itachi doing anyways? She asked. I heard he was one of the boys able to pass the advanced placement exam, huh? Makoto looked at her in confusion as she said it, as if she didn't know already. I mean, with her son being the other, she'd figure she'd know. Why, yes he did. She replied, brushing it off for the moment. What is he a Chunin now? She continued, further confusing her friend. He's ANBU, she said, now truly looking at the woman as if she were an enemy in disguise. Kushina didn't notice the gaze as her eyes were still on the children. ANBU? Wow, that's amazing, she said lowly. Makoto kept her gaze on Kushina, wondering what it was that seemed so wrong. It was like she had no idea her own son was the other boy whom rose through the ranks alongside Itachi. They're only 12 years old, and they are already ANBU agents. Surely Naruto would have told her. Through their conversations, Makoto knew they weren't exactly close, but still. When Itachi returned home with the news of his acceptance into ANBU, Fugaku and she threw a party for him. The entire clan was in attendance to witness the great feat, yet it didn't seem as if Naruto had told her anything. Deciding to test her theory, she adjusted her positioning on the seat so that she was looking more towards Kushina than the kids in the playground. Hey Kushi? She called out. Kushina tore her smiling gaze away from the children at play and looked to her friend, who seemed to have something to say. I was wondering. How is Naruto doing? For a second, a look of confusion crossed her face hearing the name. Then a mix of many more. Walking down the street in thought, Naruto searched for his family. He had gone to the compound after signing in, but they were nowhere to be found. He searched for a bit until he decided to head back to HQ. On the way, he ran into Itachi, which the two boys then decided to continue the search as they now had a better chance. So, now that they are 8, I assume they will be entering the academy along with Sasuke and the other clan children next year? Itachi asked as he walked along the path with his best friend, who still had his nose buried into his new book. Yeah. I suppose so. Naruto replied casually. Is there a reason they ended their training a year before they head for the academy? He asked. Naruto brought the book down in thought. I believe they said so they have a little time to be kids again before shinobi duties become a reality. Nodding in understanding, he continued. Since their training is over, that would mean Hokage-sama will be retaking office sometime soon. He said, receiving nothing more than emigum from the blonde. Does he know of your rank? At this he pulled the book down away from his face. I am not sure, I would assume not, as they have not left the compound in such a long time. He replied. What about Kakashi-san? He has taken missions outside of the village a few times since our foreign exploits. He possibly could have told him. Itachi suggested. Naruto nodded. Indeed. However, he seemed surprised when I signed in today. I am sure he was unaware of my status within in the ANBU Black Ops. He said. Itachi nodded again. What of Jiraiya-sama? I'm sure his spy networks have been buzzing with your name, possibly. However, I do believe I overheard Shikaku-sama explaining in frustration to someone that having both Jiraiya-sama and Tsunade-sama on leave as well was in a way crippling Konoha's defense. He said, still reading. If that is to mean he has not been out of the village, receiving the information from his contacts would have been relatively impossible, as Konoha accepts no foreign carrier birds unless marked by the other Kage themselves. He explained. So, Hokage-sama has no idea his neglected son is an actual prodigy? He asked in a joking manner. Naruto snickered. I'm not a prodigy. And I was not neglected. My parents took the steps necessary to ensure that my younger siblings were well taken care of. If I had to be set to the side for the time being, then so be it. He explained. Itachi sported a small grin. You are humble. That is good. But if you were not neglected, then who taught you everything you know? He asked. Naruto thought about it for only a second. Everyone has. He said, looking at the ravenet. Through the books they have written or left about, I have learned everything I've needed to know to become an adequate ninja on the battlefield. From Jiraiya's book The Tale of a Gutsy Ninja, I've learned to remain true to myself and to the people I love. From my father's notes, I have learned Fuinjutsu to a high enough degree that I am able to perform his signature jutsu, the Hiraishin. Itachi stared ahead in complete amazement at the love his friend held for those around him even when they didn't deserve it. And it is thanks to my mother's spare key that I had access to the Namikaze library. She gave it to me on my 6th birthday. I've learned to always look underneath the underneath from watching Kakashi and I spar with Mike Gai-san. I've learned a decent level of medical jutsu from the book Tsunade left at my house, and I've learned of the Uzumaki clan and some of their sealing techniques because of the books brought from my mother's homeland. He finished with a soft smile as he stared ahead. Everyone in my life has done more than I could have asked for, he said. If I must endure a few years of lonesomeness, then I will do so while carrying my family name with pride. Itachi looked at the blonde teen with a shake of his head. There is no man more noble than you, Naruto. Nobility is a trait we all share. As human beings, compassion shapes our existence. Sadly, so does malice. When we find ourselves, we find which of these traits suits us best. He said in a poetic way that Itachi found to be completely true. He smiled at him before looking up at the sky. Are you still looking? Itachi asked. The sounds of the street and the nearby park seemed much more noticeable as he found himself in a moment of profound amusement with the world around him. Are you? He asked him, looking away from his book. Itachi smiled a bit, perking his lips to give a reply until they tightened when they both felt a buildup of chakra. As ANBU of Konoha, they were obligated to handle any disturbance within their path involving ninja. They shunshed into the disturbance, cutting off both of the attacks before they collided. To their surprise and amusement, they were holding on to their own respective brothers. The Rasengan in Menma's hand died out as he peered up into eyes he has not seen in a very long time now that he thought about it. Sasuke allowed the ball of fire within his own hand to die out as Itachi gave him a knowing look before poking his forehead with his middle and index fingers. Naruto and I? Menma asked, clearly surprised by the sudden entry. Kushina and Mikoto came jogging up, stopping a ways away seeing it was handled. Ototo, Naruto said with a grin. Picking fights on your birthday? He asked, letting his wrist go. Naruto! Kushina yelled a bit louder than she meant to. She said, unable to find her words as she was now face to face with a child that should by all rights hate her guts. Hey Ka-san, he said with a small smile. It's okay. It was just a little playground skirmish, no harm done. He said, putting his hand on Menma's hair and rustling it up. Menma pushed his hand away, glaring up at him. It was his fault. He yelled, pleading his case to his older brother. He's the one who cheated. That's a lie. Naruto and I. Sasuke yelled in defense. He's just being a baby because I beat him. His rant was ended when Itachi squeezed his shoulder gently. No, you didn't. And don't call him Nii-san. Menma yelled in reply. Naruto chuckled at the little verbal spout and rubbed Menma's head. It's fine, Ototo. We win some, we lose some. As ninja, we're expected to cheat. Had it been a fight, you'd have lost regardless. Menma listened in finding truth to his brother's words as he at one point heard his dad say something similar. Naruto, seeing his downtrodden expression, leaned down closer so that he could whisper in his ear. But had it been a real fight, I'm sure you would have won hands down. Menma's face lit up with a smile as he turned to his brother who had his fist out towards him. Understanding the gesture, he fist bumped his brother and looked over to Sasuke, who was also receiving some form of praise as he and Itachi high-fived. When they caught eyes, they both grinned and took off back to the playground where everyone else was watching the spectacle. Naruto looked over at Itachi, already figuring he had said something along the same lines. Oh, Itachi. Lying to your little brother? He asked jokingly. Not one bit, he said with a smile. You know, you helped train him. Their conversation ended when they walked over to their mothers. Good evening, Ka-san, Namikaze-sama. He greeted. Hey Itachi-kun, Naruto-kun, Mikoto replied. Kushina just gave a quick nod with a strange expression on her face. Hello Mikoto-sama, Ka-san, Naruto said, waving his hand at the two women. So, Mikoto said with a sigh. What happened with those two? Itachi and Naruto walked until they were on either side of their respective mothers, looking out to the children playing. Itachi answered her question. It would appear Sasuke used unfavorable tactics in their game to win. Mikoto sighed again. That boy. He's just like his father. Can never admit when they've lost, she said, shaking her head. From there, Mikoto and Itachi got lost in their own conversation of who Sasuke was more alike. Kushina, however, had her perplexed expression directed at Naruto. In her musing earlier, she was sure she hadn't seen him in years. But they lived in the same house. That's neglect. Hell, that's borderline child abuse. Yet, he seems as if nothing has ever happened. Like he's been there forever. She watched him as he pulled out a little black book and began reading. Examining him further, she saw the headband around his neck. But he doesn't graduate for another week, right? Her mind then traveled back to the way he was able to stop Menma's attack. It would take a skilled ninja to do something like that. Well, Mikoto said after a fit of laughing, breaking Kushina from her thoughts. We better head home. I've got to get Sasuke ready for the festival, she said, bidding Naruto and Kushina a farewell. You coming, Itachi-kun? She asked as she walked towards the children to get Sasuke. Itachi nodded before turning to Naruto. I already spoke with Yugao-san. She says we are to stay on call, he said as Naruto nodded. With that, he nodded back and followed his mother and little brother away from the park and back to the Uchiha compound, leaving only Naruto and Kushina sitting on the bench. Now alone, Naruto decided to address the elephant in the room, or in the park. Ka-san? He said, getting her attention, which was already on him. Is there an issue? You have been staring at me for quite a while. Kushina blinked a few times. Tucking her hair behind her ear, she looked back out at Mito and Menma. Oh, I'm sorry, Naruto, she said, her voice fading out. Naruto looked at her strangely. Are you feeling okay? He asked. No, yeah. I'm fine, she said, perking up too quick for it to seem natural. Clearly forced, Naruto gave her an unconvinced before sticking his nose back into his book. So, Where will the party be? He asked her casually. The party, she whispered in slight confusion. Oh right. The other party. It's at the house. She muttered out. It's at home, a little softer. Naruto nodded from behind his book. The conversation fell silent as Naruto read and Kushina watched the children at play, mentally berating herself on how awful a mother she was. Her heart was breaking piece by piece, and the silence between them was making it worse. It hurt worse that Naruto seemed so easily forgiving. In an unexplainable way, she wanted him to hate her. She wanted him to hate all of them for leaving him to the wolves. She wanted him to tell her how much she hurt him by forgetting about him. She wanted him to say anything that would justify the feeling of hatred she felt towards herself. All she got was a smile and a wave with a sweet hello, Ka-san. She felt sick to her stomach. Ka-san? Do you enjoy reading? Naruto asked suddenly, breaking the thick silence between them. Kushina, caught off guard at first, processed the question. Reading? She asked as he nodded. No, I can't really say I do. Your father is the reader, she said, a bit disappointed she didn't have that in common with him. Naruto nodded. Ah. I figured as much. Kushina saddened a bit more at that. Was he calling her dumb? You always seemed like the type to see the beautiful world yourself instead of reading it in a book written through someone else's eyes. She looked over at him in confusion. Was he complimenting her? Really? I guess Toussaint put the books down when he met you, huh? He asked with a smile as he looked at her. Her confused visage remained the same. I read in a book written by Kiori Kotari, a poet of Rice Country, which said, through my books I experienced life in all aspects. They are my eyes for the sights I can't see and my ears for the songs I can't hear. But one day, I will meet someone who, in a strange way, will share their sight and ear with me. So that I may, one day, put my books down and enjoy life through my own eyes. Kushina dazed off and thought of the mesmerizing words. She had never heard anything so beautiful. It made her reminisce, briefly, the many adventures she and Minato ventured on. The amazing sights they witnessed as they traveled the shinobi world. Naruto made it seem like people like herself who didn't like to read were somehow special. As if they were so brilliant, they didn't have to understand what they were looking at to appreciate its magnificence. She smiled and realized she still had yet to answer his question. Yeah, I guess he did. She finally responded. Naruto smiled as he looked out towards his little sister who was playing tag with her own group of friends, mainly consisting of the clan heiresses of the Hyuga and Yamanaka clans as well as a young girl with pink hair. Mito is a lot like you, huh? He asked in wonder, drawing her attention to the little redhead. I hope she stays that way. He whispered gently. Kushina smiled, allowing a tear to fall from her left eye, away from Naruto's view. She couldn't take much more of this if she was honest. It was tearing her heart apart bit by bit. Wiping the stray tear, she allowed the thick silence to settle back in. The minutes rolled by and the only sounds present to her were the normal sounds of children at play, distant chatter, and Naruto occasionally flipping pages. Ka-san? He said, standing to his feet, getting her attention. She gave a in reply. Would you like some lunch? He asked suddenly, looking up. Kushina was surprised to see it was already a bit past noon. She didn't realize how long they had been out there. Apparently it was more than a few hours. Oh. Yeah, I guess it's about lunchtime, she said, getting to her feet, calling out to her children. Off to their long-awaited meal of the gods. Walking into the new and improved Ichiraku's, Kushina, Mito, and Menma looked around in amazement. The place was amazing. There were tables all over the place with booths lining the side. When they walked in, they were greeted by a woman they hadn't seen before. Oh my, she said in amazement, clearly recognizing the family of the Yondaime. Welcome to Ichiraku's, Mrs. Namikaze. I am pleased to serve you, she said, clearly excited by the group. She almost didn't notice Naruto. Oh. Hey Naruto, she called out again. Naruto smiled at her and waved. Hello Hikari-chan, please follow me. I'll take you to your booth, she said, grabbing a stack of menus. The family weaved through the restaurant, waving and smiling at the other customers who stopped their meals to say hello to the Namikaze family. They made it to the back booth that had a reserved card on the top. She took it off and quickly wiped it down for them to make sure it was clean. Menma and Mito sat on one side against the back wall to which they could see the rest of the restaurant. Naruto allowed his mother to slide in first, and he sat on the edge. Hikari passed out the menus before giving the table one more smile. Okay guys, I'll give you a minute to view the menu and I'll be back to take your order. Before she turned to leave, Naruto stopped her and whispered something in her ear. She nodded and walked off. Now, the table sat in relative silence as Naruto read his book and Mito and Menma argued over whatever could be argued over. Kushina felt a bit awkward sitting there with all of her children. Her mind still had no idea how to wrap around the fact that they forgot about one of their children. She wanted so badly for someone to at least talk about it, but he seemed not to care for it. Why did it hurt more that he didn't? Shouldn't she be relieved? So, how do you like the new place? Naruto asked, directing his statement to his mother even though he didn't look her way. Kushina peered over her shoulder at the decor, which she only briefly glanced at. It's beautiful, she said vaguely. Why thank you? We've worked very hard on it. A new voice said, shocking the group. Tucci! Yelled Mito and Menma, scurrying out of their seats to give the man a hug. I am walking up right behind him. Oh! I knew my favorite family hadn't forgotten about me, he said, scooping the kids up. Naruto scooted out, allowing Kushina to get up and greet them. Hey Tucci! Kushina said with a smile, giving the man a hug. Kushina, he replied, wrapping her up as well. It's so good to see you. It's great to see you too, she replied, hugging Ayam. While everyone retook their seats, Tucci and Ayam began to explain their improvements and the need for expansion. They rambled on for so long, Mito had to remind everyone what they had originally came there to do. Right. The ramen! Tucci exclaimed. Don't worry, I already know the order. It is the Namikaze special after all, he said as he and Ayam headed back to the kitchen to prepare the food. Again, the table fell somewhat silent as the kids found something new to argue about, as they always did. Kushina again fell back into her own mental state of depression over what she had done, and Naruto was stuck in his book as usual. Their attention was drawn to the front of the restaurant, however, as there was even more commotion than when they had entered. Whoever was coming in seemed to gain enough praise for a few of the patrons to stand and greet. Seeing who it was, Mito and Menma were the first to react with a simultaneous shout of "Tusan!" Minato quickly greeted those around him as he followed the waitress to where his family was. His face was set in an indescribable expression. A mixture of worry, sorrow, sadness, anger, and grief, all barely masked by a smile. Once Naruto saw who it was, he smiled and turned back to his book. Kushina continued looking in desperation. She and Minato caught eyes as he came into view. Just by looking they could tell the other was thinking the same thing. All Minato saw was his wife. He didn't have time to examine the others at the table before walking up, as his attention was continuously being drawn towards people welcoming him back. Arriving at the table in panic, Kushina, we need to tea, he began until he finally noticed the subject of his worry. Naruto. He stood there shell-shocked for a moment, as his two youngest crashed into his midsection together. He didn't know what to say. He was fearing the worst as they were in such a public area. The troubled expression on Kushina's face told him Naruto had already said a few things to her. No question he'd have more than a few for himself. Hello, Tusan? Naruto said casually as the kids sat back down. Seeing there were no more seats, he quickly got to his feet. Here, sit down, he said, gesturing towards the booth as he asked the table next to them if the empty chair was an extra. After confirming it was, he thanked them and set it at the open end. Minato looked around the table in confusion, mainly towards Kushina, who had his hand in a death-like grip beneath the table. Seeing the whole family was now together, Naruto thought it rude to have a book out, so he stashed it for the time being. Menma and Mito again, as always, began an argument that the others zoned out of. Minato and Kushina felt so tense and awkward that it would have been hard not to notice. Naruto of course saw it, and wondered what the cause was. He tried to think up a conversation that families would have at a dinner table. In a few of the fictional books he read, the family dinners that described this type of silence always consisted of some dramatic incident weighing heavy on the minds of the characters. The silence would usually be broken by a joke. Thinking up something quick, he opened his mouth in an attempt to break the ice, but as soon as he did, Tucci and Ayam came to the rescue, delivering the food. They had planned on the inhuman family devouring bowl after bowl, so they brought more than necessary, so each of them got one. After greeting Minato and bidding the family a good meal, he left them to their dinner. Menma and Mito tore into theirs with a vengeance, now making it a competition to see who could eat it fastest. Taking his jacket off and draping it over his chair, Naruto watched the spectacle in amusement before turning to his own bowl. He twiddled his chopsticks at the noodles, still uncomfortable with the silence that settled back in. Peering over, he saw his father doing the same as him and his mother staring at the Naruto fish cakes in her bowl with glossy eyes. Finally having enough of it, he cleared his throat. So, will you be retaking office tomorrow? He asked Minato, who was caught off guard. Oh yeah? He muttered out before clearing his own throat. Yeah, Naruto nodded. That's great. I think Shikaku-sama was just about ready to quit the other day, he said with an amused tone. Minato looked at the boy, unsure of what to think. Was he not mad? The whole time he spent looking for Kushina, he had gone over many scenarios for what to expect when he faced him again. He expected anger, heartbreak, indifference, or anything else. But not this. Not whatever this was. Yeah? That sounds like him, he replied back, forcing a few chuckles out. Naruto smiled, happy they at least got the conversation started. I guess Hokage isn't for everybody, he said, chuckling as well. If brains is all it took, then we'd be run by the Nara clan with mandatory cloud watching every other hour, he said, receiving an actual chuckle from his father to his amusement. That's true, he said with a smile. Or maybe an official nap time for the whole village, he said as he and Naruto shared a laugh, with Kushina smiling off to the side, shaking her head. They're not all bad. I mean, Yoshino isn't like that, Kushina said, defending her friend. Naruto and Minato ended their laugh to plead their case. Yes. But she was not born in the clan. She was merely married into it, and according to Shikaku she does have her moments, Minato said with a few remaining chuckles. Figuring it an unfair match-up, Kushina just chuckled along and began to eat her ramen. Do you plan on becoming active again, Ka-san? Naruto asked. Kushina slurped the noodles hanging from her mouth so that she could answer. No. I think I'm just going to keep training Mito and Menma until they have gotten out of the academy. After that, I may consider it. She replied. Ah. Naruto said. That is a sound plan. Will you be their Jonin-sensei? He asked. Well, I'm not sure. I think your father wanted Kakashi to be their sensei, she said, looking his way. Minato slurped the noodles in his mouth as well. Ah, that is the plan, he said, still chewing. I mean, if he still wants it, of course. Kakashi and I sounds like a swell idea, Naruto said. Before the conversation could continue, a very unexpected statement left the mouth of someone none of them expected. I thought you were dead. The table stopped everything and peered over at Mito in shock. Her eyes glued on Naruto. Mito! Kushina exclaimed. Why would you say that? She demanded. Mito looked back at her mother in confusion as she didn't understand why she was in trouble. What? We haven't seen him in years, she said, pointing out the concern Minato and Kushina had been dreading. Mito, that's Minato said, trying to explain, choking on his own words. He looked to Kushina for assistance, but she didn't seem to have anything to say either. In an attempt to get something out, he muttered, We haven't seen a lot of people in years. Yeah, but he's supposed to live with us, she replied in confusion. He doesn't come to breakfast or dinner or training or any of that. Minato and Kushina were at a loss of words as they didn't know what to say. To their glee, Naruto answered. Well, Imuto, you and Menma hold a very special power inside you. A power that you have to learn to control as soon as possible, he explained. You mean the Kyuubi? She asked. Naruto nodded. Yeah. The Kyuubi, well, in order to gain control over it, it takes a lot of practice and training. That's why you guys have been on a very strict schedule. From the moment you guys woke up to the moment you went to sleep, you have had something to do, right? He asked, receiving a nod from the both of them. Well, you see me? I'm much too lazy to do what you guys do, he said, receiving looks of amusement from the two. You're lazy, and I-san? Menma asked. Oh, the laziest. What you guys do is way too much. You must be superheroes or something, he said, receiving giggles from the two. Minato and Kushina watched the scene in wonder. There was a piece of them that felt guilty about what they did, but there was another that told them he understood. Now that Menma and Mito were at a decent enough level, they were both determined to train Naruto as well. Well, that's what they were hoping for. Mito, now comfortable with the explanation, was still hungry as Menma took the last bowl. Seeing Naruto barely ate his second one, she asked him for it. Nisan, are you gonna eat that? Naruto shook his head with a smile as he passed it to her. In doing so, Menma's eyes lit up with shock and awe as Naruto's left sleeve raised up from extending his body, and he could see his bare arm. You have a tattoo, he exclaimed. Minato and Kushina both stopped their eating, hearing the exclamation. In Konoha, it was illegal for shinobi to have tattoos. Well, there was one exception. Ah, yes, I do, Naruto replied, rolling his sleeve up so they could see. Menma and Mito leaned in, poking at it as if it was something you could feel. What is it? Mito asked. It's my ANBU tattoo, he said, looking down at it as well. Both Minato and Kushina thought the same thing. ANBU, the Namikaze compound, was bursting with excitement. Well, as much excitement as a kid's party could have. The massive property was filled with important people. Almost all of the clan heads and their children were in attendance, and even a few civilians who were glad their children had been invited by the birthday kids just a few hours ago at the festival. A joyous occasion it was. There was food being served, music being played, and plenty of kid-friendly activities taking place in the training area. The children were continuing their game from earlier in a boys versus girls match that would have been outmatched had it not been for Mito somehow being able to hold her own against both Menma and Sasuke. While that was going on, the adults remained inside, chatting with one another or spilling the latest gossip around the village. As comical as it is with the people they knew, there was plenty to talk about. For one, it seemed as though Kakashi was stuck to his remaining teammate like glue, with people speculating on their more than friendly relationship, Tsunade and Shizen leading the talk. Then there was Jiraiya, trying his best to talk up a few of the single civilian moms who were adamantly denying his requests. Most of the clan heads, including the Yamanaka, Akimichi, Aburame, Inuzuka, and Hyuga clan heads, were discussing next year's academy class and the training they had done to prepare their children. In the kitchen, Kushina, Yoshino, Mikoto, and Ayam prepared plates of food for the guests, and made sure everything was ready for cake and ice cream for later on. Kushina was working like a mindless drone, not even paying attention to what her friends were saying. Her mind too focused on her forgotten son, as it had been since they parted ways after the Kyuubi festival. Still a painfully fresh realization, she just wanted this day to end. It seemed everlasting, as if Kami wanted her to suffer as long as possible. That thought hurt as well. She couldn't even force a smile for her other children on their birthday. This really wasn't how she imagined this day going. It was supposed to be a day of relaxing and fun after the long period of stressful work they had put in over the 3 years. Stressful in the way that they really didn't make much progress. At the end of it all, Mito and Menma's skills were barely genin level at best. Of course, that isn't too bad for kids not even in the academy yet, but even so. In the same period of time, one of her children excelled to the rank of ANBU. On his own. What did that say about their flawless training schedule? She still couldn't believe it. Any of it. Naruto had graduated the academy at the age of 9. He didn't even stay a full year. Then, he became Chunin at 10 and ANBU a few months later. It filled her with so many mixed emotions that she didn't know what it was she was supposed to feel. Was she supposed to feel happy for him, or sad he never told them? Prideful that her son was such a prodigy, or disappointed that he didn't need them? There were just too many possibilities that jumbled together, and too many unexplainable variables that threw her for a loop. Mainly Naruto's attitude towards the whole ordeal. His nonchalant manner as if it didn't happen. If he had been angry with them, or spiteful, then she'd know exactly how to feel. She'd understand her feeling of self-hatred, but she didn't know how to feel about blatant disregard. She could not process the seamless forgiveness he held for them. All it did was hurt more than it would have had he called them out on it or ignored them altogether. When she had gotten home from Ichiraku's, the first thing she did was go up to his room. There was nothing left within it sans a dusty note on his bed. The date it was written is what broke her heart more than the content itself. It was August 21st, Naruto's birthday. The note had explained his reasoning for moving out, highlighting points such as him turning 10 and being an active ninja, therefore making him an adult. Then it talked about not wanting to disturb anybody when he came home late from a mission, him taking up space, or using utilities for free when he now had an income to assist in paying. Confusing her as he said, I read in a book that in a well-functioning household, all occupants should pay a portion of the bills as is proper etiquette. It didn't make sense to her that he wouldn't bring the matter up with them before making such a brash decision. Regardless, that day, 2 years ago, he moved out. And they were just finding out now. What did that say for her mothering skills? She could try and tell herself the schedule was too filling or that he had always been quiet, but she knew it was all bullshit. Just sad attempts to convince herself that she was still salvageable as a caring mother. How could she fault herself on something everyone would do right? God, she hated this day so much. The day they had all been waiting for all week long. It was a hellish experience that slowed down second by second every time her heart beat. They hadn't spoken yet, but she knew Minato was feeling the same way. Walking back into the kitchen, Minato grabbed 2 more plates from the counter silently, walking them back out to the guests. A perfectly fake smile plastered expertly on his face as he weaved through the crowded home, searching for someone without a plate. Just as he had been doing all day, he greeted everyone who addressed him first, only giving them quick hellos or chuckles when they threw a joke his way. All for the purpose of masking his agonizing frustration. Naruto and the others parted ways after leaving Ichiraku's as he and Kushina brought Mito and Menma home to get dressed for the festival. After receiving that note from Kushina, a spark lit inside him that wasn't there while at the restaurant. Then, he couldn't even find the words to talk to his son. Now, all he wanted to do was have a conversation with him. To explain things or at the very least get a better feel for how Naruto felt. He couldn't accept that Naruto would just forgive them so easily. There had to be some level of resentment. Maybe just a little, but there just had to be something. In a stroke of good luck for the first time that day, Minato saw Naruto and Itachi walking up the walkway through the window. He decided now was the time. If he put it off any longer he'd go insane. Handing out the final plate, he briskly walked towards the door. Before he made it, it was already opening. Hokage-sama, said Itachi bowing in respect. Minato scratched the back of his head with a bashful smile. There's no need for that, Itachi. Please come in, he said stepping aside. Itachi nodded and went further into the house. Spying someone that caught his attention, he bid the two a farewell, leaving Naruto and Minato at the door. Hello, Toussan? He said, holding up the gifts he had brought for Mito and Menma. Would you happen to know where I can place these? He asked. Minato searched around, not really sure where Kushina had set everything up. No, I can't say I do, he replied. Naruto nodded his head and looked around for someone who might. Nodding to his father with a smile, he began to leave. Now or never, Minato thought. Hey Naruto, he called out, stopping him before he could leave. Naruto looked at him attentively. Could I talk to you for a bit? He asked, nodding his head up towards the top of the stairs. Of course. May I alert Kasen that I am here? He asked, gesturing towards the kitchen. Minato quickly nodded and tucked his hands into his pockets, now feeling a lot more nervous than he felt just a few minutes ago. As Naruto left, Minato headed upstairs, sure he had gotten the hint it was a conversation to be held in private, away from the people. He stood in his and Kushina's bedroom, pacing back and forth, really thinking about what it was he wanted to say to him. He didn't want to bombard him with questions or just blatantly ask him how he felt. He didn't really want to talk him into it either. Naruto is an ANBU operative, so Minato was sure he'd be able to deduce such a tactic. His plan wasn't interrogation, he just wanted to talk to his son. After dropping off his gifts at the table he spotted in the backyard, Naruto greeted his mother, who seemed as awkward as she had at the restaurant. Passing it off as a possible overwhelming of her return, he didn't address it. Now, on his way up the stairs, he tried to guess what it was his father wanted to talk about. Possibly his incredulous growth and how he acquired his jutsu. He was sure he'd get scolded for not being patient, but Itachi and he were in such a competition, he didn't even think about it. He just had to keep finding something to get ahead of him. Every time, however, Itachi came with something newer and better, so Naruto had to keep up. Before he knew it, he was mastering his father's sealing notes. Kami, he prayed this didn't have to do with that. Making it to the top of the stairs, he reminisced how long it had been since he'd been there. Everything was just the same. On the way, he passed by his old bedroom, peering inside. He noticed the note was gone, so maybe they had known of his self-training. Finally arriving, he knocked on the door awaiting his father's approval to enter. Hearing the muffled come in, he stepped in and shut the door. Minato was outside on the balcony, overlooking the children in the backyard. Naruto stepped up and stood next to him. He looked down at the way Menma and Sasuke argued as they both drew their plan of action in the dirt for the rest of the boys to see, debating on which would work better. Those two will become something amazing one day, Naruto said, once again kicking off the conversation. Minato didn't reply. He just continued to stare out at the group of kids, segregated by gender, plotting against the opposing side. There was a question resting on his tongue, but he couldn't ask it. He couldn't even speak. That's a lot how Itachi and our Naruto continued, trying to get the man to say anything. Minato only chuckled so lowly, it almost sounded like he just blew more air out of his nose than usual. After a few more painful seconds of silence, Naruto nudged him. So Toussaint, what was it you wished to speak about? Now, with no way to avoid the conversation that he himself requested, Minato cleared his throat, giving himself another few seconds to think about how to word it. Or, at least figure out whatever it was. He tried. Naruto watched as his mouth opened and closed noiselessly as if the words were just not there. I wanted to talk to you about, well, everything, he said, finally spitting it out. Naruto still didn't fully understand. Was he talking about the various jutsu he stole? I apologize. I don't believe I follow you. Naruto replied. Naruto. I want you to understand, I mean to know that your mother and I, the words were just non-existent when he tried to form a sentence. We love you. Naruto looked at him just as confused as he had been the entire time. We always have. Processing his words, Naruto's face went through a mixture of emotions including realization, sadness, panic, and worry. He looked at his father in concern. Toussaint. Minato waited with his breath caught in his chest. Are you and Ka-san getting divorced? Minato stared in shock, with a face that asked, where'd you get that idea from? Naruto fished through his pouch. I read in a book that describes this scenario perfectly. First, you and Ka-san seemed very tense and detached all day, you barely spoke with one another at lunch, and one of the final steps is pulling the children aside separately so that you can explain it. Minato was at a loss for words. It was such a strange assumption to come to. Stepping back, he could see of course the similarities in the situations, but still. For an ANBU operative, he had assumed he'd be a little more observant and analytical. So stunned, he still hadn't said a word, so Naruto continued on with facts he once read. Sometimes marriages fail when the partners feel as though they are too confined within their everyday life. He said, pulling out a little white book, flipping a few pages. Possibly the training regimen is to blame. Since it is over, may I suggest a vacation sometime in the near future? There are amazing spas within Spring Country. I read about them when I was. Whoa, Minato cut in, finally zoning back into reality. We are not getting divorced, okay? He stated, calming the boy down. That's not it, son. I just wanted to let you know that in case you didn't know. Still Naruto was confused. Well, of course I know that, I mean, why wouldn't I? He asked him. Minato looked at him. No one was this forgiving. Is this about me not telling you of the ANBU thing? Minato didn't get a chance to answer before he continued. I was going to Toussaint, honest. But you guys were working so hard, I didn't want to bother you. It's not that either, well, that wasn't all of it. Mustering up the courage to finally discuss it, he stopped, hearing the familiar sound of a shunshin. An ANBU agent appeared on the ledge. He climbed down and bowed in the presence of the Hokage, but addressed the one he was there to retrieve, Tora-san. A mission has appeared which requires your team's expertise. The man said. Please gather Weasel-san and report to the ANBU HQ within 30 minutes. I understand. He said, nodding to the man. Once he shunshined away, Naruto turned to Minato. Well, duty calls and what not, he said, stepping back inside. Some other time, Toussaint. Oh, and let Mito and Menma know I was here. He called out over his shoulder. Damn it. Minato thought. He just missed his chance. Of course, he understood though, being in the ANBU himself at one point. When they called, you went, no matter what you had to drop to do so. Next time he got the opportunity, he wasn't wasting it as he had just then. He'd be sure of it. Walking down the street, away from the Namikaze compound, Naruto continued to annoy his friend with false kissing noises, teasing him for his infatuation with a girl within his clan, Izumi Uchiha. Calming down from his previous streak of laughing, he nudged his arm with his elbow, seeing he was upset. Ah, come on, Itachi. I believe your infatuation with Izumi-san is something to be cherished. It is quite beautiful actually. For those in our profession to find such a connection to someone who hasn't yet seen the things we have is fantastic. It shows that, despite the horrors we have experienced, there is still humanity within you. In the life of shinobi, maintaining one's humanity is something frowned upon when at war. But to me, it mattered not. For I was determined to be more than the kunai they told me I was. Yonya-ji, the weapon I was. Naruto said, throwing out a quote from a book that he found suited the situation, while citing the author and book verbally. Itachi snickered. You and these quotes. You've got one for everything, huh? He asked rhetorically as a way of shifting the conversation. Not quite, sometimes they just fit rather well. He said, scratching the back of his head, smiling in embarrassment. Itachi nodded. It would seem as though many of them do. Silence settled in after that while they walked through the streets of the village in the aftermath of the festival. Various pieces of trash from goodies and whatnot lay scattered around the streets. Vendors from out of the village packed up their stuff, ready to head back to wherever they had come. Nearly midnight, there weren't too many people out and about as everyone left standing were adults who packed into the numerous bars around the village for some late-night drinking. As they walked, they were greeted by the few passing Uchiha patrols who nodded in their direction. All the while, Naruto stuck behind the book Itachi gave him and Itachi gone within his own thoughts. Itachi, Naruto said, getting his attention. May I ask you what it is like? Itachi raised an eyebrow, unsure of what he meant. To be in love. He clarified. Itachi grunted as is seemingly customary for his clan. And you'd assume I'd know? Well, of course you would. Naruto said. You are in love with Izumi-san, right? She is just a friend. Itachi replied. Naruto looked at him, confused by his denial. But you show the signs of someone in love. He said, rummaging through his pouch, pulling out a scroll. He unrolled it, and unsealed yet another book. Nakami Utsukiya, a marriage counselor of Spring Country, wrote a love novel in which the main character states, I know the signs of a man in love. You can't get all of your information from fictional writing. Itachi butt in, looking at the book he had in his hand. Naruto looked at him, still as confused as before. Why not? It is usually a good source for a different perspective on most topics. Right. Itachi replied. But they are usually opinions of the author. Not proven fact. Sometimes that is not always the point. Naruto replied, sending him a smile. If you would read a few of them yourself, you would discover things about Itachi Uchiha that you may find interesting. You believe you are not in love, but I could wager my life you are. Naruto said, looking ahead to the HQ that was now in sight. You seem to be in a rush to meet death. He said, receiving a chuckle from the blonde as they entered the building. Opening his locker to adorn his uniform, Naruto continued the conversation. The thing about books is that a man could live 1,000 lives if he so wished. Living one good life in reality seems much more fulfilling. Itachi contended. To individuals such as yourself, I suppose? For some, hearing what the world means to others is fulfilling as well. Shinobi especially. He debated. How so? Itachi asked, clamping on his forearm guards. Strapping his black sword to his back, Naruto reached up for the top of the locker, pulling down his mask. We are subjected to scenes most people wouldn't even dare write about. On a weekly basis, we view scenes depicting pain, sorrow, hatred, and fear, but not much else. For the lucky few, those things come along with admiration, he said, hinting at Itachi. But for others, a good book can remind you that there is some good in this world. Without an outlet, we'd lost our minds. So, that's why you read them? Itachi asked, placing his weevil mask on. Naruto put his tiger-painted mask on as well. We all need something. Opening the door to the mission briefing room, Yugao and Hate were already overlooking a map for the mission parameters. Naruto and Itachi walked in and stood at the opposite side of the table at attention. Hate and Yugao were seemingly working out the kinks. When they finished, they nodded to each other and got the attention of their young prodigies. Okay. Hate began with 2 small coughs afterwards. This mission is a search and rescue. We will be heading into Kusagakure. Our team was requested due to the claims of the enemy possessing some sort of impressive genjutsu. Weevil's Sharingan is vital. He explained as the black-haired teen nodded in understanding. When we get through that, there was also a claim of our target being locked within some sort of high-class sealing technique, which is where Tora comes in. Receiving his nod of confirmation, he continued. Our target is the son of a rich merchant, Kaijo Nomo. Mr. Nomo received a letter a few weeks ago offering a trade of his own head for his son's life. Being the closest village, we were offered the mission with major payout. We are expected to face low-ranking nukes, C to possibly B class at best. However, along the quickest route, which is the one we will be taking as time is of the essence, there have been sightings of possible S ranks. He finished. Yugao continued after him. Remain light on your toes and stay alert. It is a 12-day trip there on foot. We will be taking the trees which will cut it down to 8. Our estimated ETA is 2 weeks. Piggybacking off of her, Hate continued. That is, of course, if we are able to retrieve the boy within the first 2 days of us being there. Let's get in, get the boy, and get out. No unauthorized side missions, he said as Tora and Weevil gave quick bows to their superiors with a simultaneous shout of hi. The team of ANBU operatives departed 5 minutes later. Happy birthday, dear Menma and Mito, happy birthday to you. The party occupants all sang in unison, cheering as the two blew their candles out. From there, a quieter than usual Kushina cut the massive cake as the women who volunteered to help passed out plates of the delicious sweet to the kids and guests. It was midnight, so most of the party-goers had retired to their homes, trusting that whatever gift they got for the two would be useful in some way. Kushina's smile had long since faded as she was too tired to even pretend anymore. As Menma and Mito opened gifts, she sat in a chair off to the side, mindlessly staring at something within her line of sight. Glossy-eyed and uninterested at the excitement of the two children she has seen for 3 years straight. She had never felt so annoyed of her two prized children before this point. For whatever the reason was, she just wanted them to quit being so joyful. A clear sign of her exhaustion, she held her tongue. Minato was at the end of his rope as well. He leaned against the door frame of the backyard, looking in on Mito and Menma opening present after present while the kids surrounding them stared on in awe. Never before had he felt so mentally and physically drained. Having both fought in and commanded an army in war, that was definitely saying something. Who knew mentally kicking yourself in the ass could drain you so much? After all of the excitement had left the atmosphere and the parents had reached their limit, the party's numbers dwindled bit by bit. Everyone finding it an absolute must to bid the Hokage a good night, which he returned systematically, trying to get them out as fast as he could. Before too long, there were only a few remaining stragglers. Mainly those whose wives stayed behind to assist in the cleaning. A little longer, and it was just the Uchihas. Standing in the doorway, Minato was approached by Fugaku for the first time that night. He was so busy that he didn't have much time to associate with anyone other than his brief conversation with his son. Well, I assume by your recent mannerisms that you've learned of your son's success? He asked him in a knowing tone. Minato was too tired to decide if it were meant to be a simple statement, or an insult hidden within a question, so he went with the former to avoid any conflict. Yeah, he's amazing, indeed. Fugaku replied. Those two will far surpass us in time. He continued, gazing out at the view he could see from the porch. Maybe they already have. Minato chuckled at that. From the things I've heard today, I wouldn't doubt it. He is full of surprises, that son of yours. Minato turned to him. How much do you know of him? He asked suddenly. Fugaku peered at him in questioning. Depends on what you're asking. Well, how strong is he really? What are his abilities and what not? Minato stated more so than asked. Hearing his wife bidding Kushina a good night, Fugaku chuckled at the question. I'd advise going to watch the film of their match within the Chunin exams, he said with a smile. I warn you now. It is absolutely spectacular. Minato wanted him to elaborate, but as it had been all day, his luck was against him. Ah, Minato, said Mikoto walking over with Sasuke. Say bye, Sasuke-kun, she said, leading him towards the door. Good night, Menmas-san, he said, receiving a flick to the ear from his mother. Oh, I mean, Hokage-sama, he corrected. Mikoto shook her head as he jogged out the door. That boy, she said lowly. What are you two talking about? Just man things, Fugaku said a little too hastily. Before he realized his slip of the tongue, he could feel a chilly presence behind him, accented with enough killer intent to make Minato gulp. Turning around, he looked into the playful eyes of his wife. Oh, and what would these so-called man-things entail? She asked sweetly. Fugaku gulped as well, looking over to Minato, who avoided his eye contact at all costs. He began, but quickly ended whatever he was about to say as it wasn't wise for his health. Are you okay, dear? She asked still as sweetly as before. Maybe I should get you home. She finished pushing him out the door gently. Good night, Minato, she said, smiling at him as well. Minato watched them go as they linked arms. Fugaku turned back to him with a face he's seen on many men either leaving or headed to war. He'd spare a brief prayer for the man that night. But he was glad everyone was finally gone. Walking into the kitchen, he saw Kushina doing the dishes. He stepped up beside her and began to help her. I got it, she said with a flat tone that held an underlining of annoyance. It's fine. I can help, he said, pulling out a fresh rag for drying. Kushina let the dishes in her hands drop down, clattering against the metal sink, startling Minato. She looked up to the ceiling in frustration, shutting her eyes and taking a breath to steady herself. Minato? She whispered lowly. I said. I got it. He put the rag and plate down and placed his hands along the edge of the counter to support his weight. His eyes were firmly set on the sink handle that seemed so interesting for some reason. He was thinking of something to say in this situation. No words were coming to mind, but he really wasn't interested in going to bed with an angry Kushina. He had to think of something that could possibly calm her down. She went back to washing the dishes, simply reaching across the man when she had to. Minato looked at her and thought. Maybe reassurance? He doesn't hate us, and that makes it better? She asked immediately, as if she had been prepared for that question for a while. No, but maybe it means we have a chance to make it right? He said hopefully. Kushina didn't seem convinced. Make it right? She asked once again, dropping the dishes down. Make it right, she bellowed louder. What the hell do you mean make it re? She yelled, dying off, hearing Mito and Menma walk in. She quickly tightened her lips shut and began aggressively scrubbing at a plate that had been clean for a while now. Minato heard the two come in as well, but his eyes were still on the side of Kushina's face, mentally pleading with her to talk to him so that they could work through it. Mito and Menma looked at the two in worry as they had never really seen them fight before. Neither brave enough to say anything, they just watched as Minato turned around and sighed. Come on you two, it's time for bed. They stood rooted to their spots until he walked over to them, ushering them out of the room. Kushina was left there with her face in her hands and tears falling freely. This life was not going as she had planned out just 12 hours ago. Nothing was right, but everyone acted as if nothing was wrong. Four masked ANBU ninja of Konohagakure were perched in a tree, overlooking a temple of some sort. There were a number of nuke ninja guarding the perimeter. From their position, they couldn't see any under the rank of B. Some of them were minor A's, but all of them high-class killers that could stand toe-to-toe with at least a Jonin on their own. Among the bunch were two individuals they really had to worry about, Deidara, Iwa's Mad Bomber, and Rajan Kirin, of Kumo. Both S-class killers with amazing abilities that had to be respected. Performing hand signals to speak with each other, Hate commanded Naruto and Itachi to search the back of the temple for any entrance as he and Yugao decided on a plan of action. Their main priority was getting the boy. A stealthy approach was the only way to go about it. They couldn't go with an aggressive tactic as the boy could be killed before they reached him. It would be the issue of finding him more than anything. He had the thought of just sending in Naruto and Itachi, as they were the most well-equipped for the possible obstacles within, but he opted out seeing the type of manpower the captive was willing to hire for just the outward defense. When hiring men, you want the best of the best to be near you or whatever high-value possession you are trying to protect. With two S ranks guarding the door, Hate actually feared what kind of monster they had inside. Landing in a tree high enough to give them a better vantage point, Naruto and Itachi scoped out the back of the temple. From the naked eye, Naruto couldn't see much. Luckily, Itachi could. Using the ANBU hand signals, he conveyed to the blonde that there was a small hole in the wall. There was some sort of powerful genjutsu layered atop of it. With a possible entrance, the two headed back for Yugao and Hate. Hate had gone over the only possible way he saw them doing this successfully, with having Naruto and Itachi going in first to retrieve the boy as they caused a disturbance from outside to pave a way for their escape. Yugao profusely denied the plan's possibility for success, arguing that they may not find a way in. As unlucky timing would have it, they came back with news of finding a way in. She then argued that they may not be capable of taking down whatever opponent was guarding the objective. Not wanting to waste much more time, Hate left the decision up to the two of them. Itachi, in turn, left the decision up to Naruto. Weighing the option, he felt as though he and Itachi could take down anyone they faced. He said they could do it, so Hate and Yugao got into position within the foliage of the front of the temple as Naruto and Itachi snuck around back again. Itachi instructed Naruto to stay right on his heels as he prepared to make the leap for the hole. Naruto, of course, didn't see the hole, but he trusted Itachi's judgment. They had to time it right to avoid detection from the patrolling ninja pacing along the back of the temple. As soon as they could make the jump without alarming them, they did. Landing inside, Itachi and Naruto clung to the ceiling using chakra. They were hidden within the darkness of the corners. Crawling down the halls, Itachi directed them as the entire place was distorted with genjutsu. To Naruto, it seemed as if Itachi was simply crawling through walls. Feeling the paths he thought he saw, he was astounded that it was solid wall. This was a truly impressive genjutsu. As they continued along, he could hear the people talking around them, but he couldn't see them. Of course, it would have been easy for Naruto to just dispel its effects on him, but that would take a huge burst of chakra, and it'd give their position away. So, following Itachi was the best option. They crawled deeper and deeper into the facility, going down stairways and descending corridors. By now they had to be at least 20 feet below ground. They hadn't seen or heard a guard for a few minutes now, so Itachi was questionable as to if they were even going the right way. Regardless, they continued until they made it to the very end. Finally making it, sure enough, their target was there, chained to a wall and covered in various seals and inkling. Naruto signaled to Itachi asking him why they stopped. Itachi told him the direction of the target and the state he was in. After feeling around for anyone else, they figured they were in the clear for Naruto to dispel it. When he did, he saw the man in his mid-20s strung up on the wall like decoration. Itachi and Naruto dropped to the ground soundlessly. They headed for the open room before Naruto stopped Itachi from stepping over the threshold. Itachi stepped back as the blonde dug through his pouch. Pulling out a piece of paper, he wrote a seal on it before balling it up. Then he aimed for the center of the room and tossed it in. As soon as he did, seals all around the room began to light up. There were all kinds from alarm seals, explosive tags, and even barrier seals that would shoot up as soon as someone stepped in, trapping them inside with the dangerous concoction of deadly paper and ink. Itachi signed, "How long?" Which Naruto replied with, 5 minutes. Itachi nodded and turned the other way to keep watch. Naruto went to work drawing up seal that would effectively disable each of the foreign tags in the order that they should be disabled. First, it had to activate the barrier in case the others failed and actually blew. He had to secure the target, so he drew up another one that would encase him in a separate barrier just in case. And he also had to send one to bring the barrier down on his command if he was successful in disabling the others. The alarm seals were the most important to bring down. He had to figure that they were triggered by the barrier activating. So, before anything, he had to disrupt those. Itachi peeked back, checking to see if the blonde was done or not. He watched him working diligently, and knew he figured out how to do it by how fast he was scribbling. Naruto got the idea to use very high-powered chakra-draining seals. Alarming seals like those worked by overloading the seal with chakra. When exposed to foreign chakra, they emitted a very high screeching sound that most any ninja could hear from a mile away. So, with his very high-powered chakra-draining seals, he drained them before they ever got the chance to work. Now ready, he first successfully disabled the alarming seals. They weren't able to emit even the slightest squeak before they were drained. Then, he threw in his own barrier seal at the target's forehead, coating him in a small barrier. Next he threw in 3 other seals all simultaneously. Immediately the barrier flew up around the room, causing his first seal to burn away. Then, the explosive tags around the room fell from their positions around the room, crumbling before they even hit the ground. When all of the seals were dealt with, Naruto waited for a few seconds more. Nodding, he looked back at Itachi telling him it's done. Walking over, Itachi stood next to the blonde as he performed hand signs. His last tag fizzed out along with the barrier, and the 4 tags placed around the room. They walked into the room with no issue. Making it to the young man, Naruto again performed a hand sign and his barrier seal fell from his forehead. Now, the challenge was getting this seal off of the man so that he could be removed from the temple. He knew of this seal, he read about it once when he was just learning Fuinjutsu techniques. It was a seal directly linked to the sealer's chakra, so anything that happened to it could be felt. It was commonly used within Hozuki Castle, better known as Blood Prison. If they were to try and sneak him out of there, they'd kill him. The only way to dispel the seal is for the sealer to do so manually or to kill the sealer. To do so, they'd have to alarm him. Naruto devised a plan. First, he put up some fake alarm and explosive tags. He'd also put up his own barrier seals that would have the added benefit of canceling sound. He'd sneak another mini barrier tag on the back of their objective to keep him protected. With Itachi and him, fighting in such a small room would give them the advantage over whoever it was they had to face. When Itachi agreed he was ready, Naruto purposely tampered with the man's seal incorrectly, scorching his hand a bit. When he did, he jumped back up to the ceiling, melding into the shadows just as Itachi was. There, they waited for someone to come check on the seal. 5 minutes passed and absolutely nothing happened. Itachi asked Naruto if maybe he should try it again. Naruto only shook his head stating, "Someone will come." So they waited and waited, until finally, they could hear footsteps slowly descending the hall. There was only one set of footsteps, which gave them a much more positive approach to the situation. This would be easy. The footsteps got closer and closer. With each step they were filled with more and more dread. They couldn't describe the feeling. It was like an overwhelming feeling of anxiety. Being as experienced as they are, they brushed it off and held their position. Whoever this was would not go down as easily as they had hoped. The footsteps stopped abruptly at the doorstep. Naruto was worried they would just examine the seal from that distance, which would ruin their plan. Luckily, they continued in. Immediately, their blood ran cold. Walking up to the man was none other than the snake Sannin himself, Orochimaru. Chuckling in his psychotic way, he addressed the incapacitated man directly. "Let's see what's wrong with your seal," he said, looking at it. Itachi got Naruto's attention, telling him now. Naruto acted quickly, throwing the barrier up and dropping down on the man. As if he had known of their plan the entire time, Orochimaru turned around, dodging their attacks and kicking them back into the barrier. Chuckling again, he addressed them. "Minato's lapdogs. Coming to interrupt my little deal, huh?" he asked, standing in his spot completely unfazed by their presence. "You two look awfully young for ANBU." Naruto and Itachi stayed crouched in their own positions, ready for the snake to strike. Both of them riddled in fear, but determined to complete the task or at this point survive. "I know who you are," he said, shocking them. They slowly got into positions to which they could attack him. "The two brats from that Kumo Chunin exams, huh? Itachi Uchiha and Naruto Namikaze," he finished with a chuckle. "Yes, it must be. I can feel the power oozing from your bodies." He watched the two giving hand signs that he didn't know, as they change every 3 years. "Well, the Sharingan is truly a great gift, and with a Namikaze, I'm absolutely blessed. Now, who shall I take first?" he asked again with his twisted chuckle. Naruto and Itachi took the initiative, lunging at him. Naruto was the first to engage him, throwing a right hook that was of course easily dodged. He followed up with a spinning back kick that was blocked, throwing him off balance. Itachi came in next with a kunai in hand, slashing and slicing into nothing but air as the Sannin easily dodged each attack even within such a confined room. Catching his wrist, Orochimaru kicked him in the chest, plucking the kunai from his hand. Naruto came in next with his black sword drawn, swinging expertly at the man that narrowly dodged each attack. Using the kunai, he parried the attack close to the base of the blade, causing it to fly from Naruto's hand. Itachi jumped up, catching the blade in midair, and began delivering another series of strikes towards the slippery man. As Itachi kept him on the defense, Naruto went low, kicking at the back of the man's knee, sending him to the ground. Itachi went for a piercing blow to his chest that was blocked when Orochimaru kicked his wrist. Naruto flew in with a flying axe kick that connected with the bottom of the barrier, as Orochimaru rolled away. Itachi went in for a drop kick that missed the snake by an inch when he sidestepped, kicking him away. Naruto flipped away from the kunai that soared his way. He drew two of his own and headed back in. He slashed at the man, trying to get some kind of hit, but was blocked at every strike. Orochimaru forcefully opened his guard, giving him a vicious kick to the chest, sending him back towards a charging Itachi. Itachi flipped over him, grabbing his hand to stop him from hitting the barrier. He kept charging, going in feigning a right hook. He delivered a back kick to the man's chest. Orochimaru took the kick and dodged the follow-up kunai slash. Itachi then suddenly ducked as Naruto came flying in with a kick that Orochimaru leaned back to avoid. He then jumped, avoiding the slash at his feet from Itachi. In doing so, it opened himself up for Naruto's follow-up left back kick that caught him in the face. As he spun with the kick, he dodged Itachi's kunai that came soaring towards his face. Rolling forward, he picked it up and parried Naruto's slash with his own, sending the blonde's kunai flying over his head. Naruto rolled backwards, avoiding the slash at his chest as Itachi jumped over him in a somersault, kicking the airborne kunai down into the right leg of the snake Sannin, who wasn't expecting such a maneuver. Seeing he was injured, the two ran in, delivering blow after blow that was still either blocked or dodged. Orochimaru plucked the kunai from his leg, tossing it at the charging duo that split to avoid it. Itachi slid on his side at the snake that jumped over him, coming back down for a stomp to his chest. He rolled away and Naruto came in to cover his escape with a series of punches that all seemed to miss. Orochimaru jumped back to avoid Itachi's axe kick. Naruto leaped over his partner and went for a kick to the man's chest that slipped past him. Itachi got back up and went for a roundhouse kick that Orochimaru ducked under to avoid. He gave the brunette a very hard kick that sent him back to the other barrier, leaving him struggling to stand back to his feet. Naruto tried for a right hook that slipped past his face. Orochimaru clamped down on his wrist. He ducked under his arm, bringing his wrist with him. With a gentle jerk, he snapped his arm with a sickening crack. Using the broken appendage, he swung the blonde around and threw him at his partner, who still hadn't made it to his feet. Chuckling, Orochimaru crossed his arms, staring at the two. "Well done. I commend you for landing a few blows," he said, pacing over to the man still chained to the wall. He performed a few hand signs and placed his fingers on the man's back. The barrier Naruto put up for the man faded away. "You two have piqued my interest. For that reason alone, I have decided to spare you," he said, going through more hand signs. He then placed his hand on the man's chest, and the seal sucked back into his palm. "I'll be seeing you two soon," he said, walking back towards the exit. As if it were his own seal, he performed hand signs and the barrier faded. Naruto and Itachi remained there, shocked at the unexplainable turn of events. Not wanting to waste the opportunity for escape, they immediately left the area with the man slung across their shoulders. Walking out of the temple, they noticed the lack of its previous occupants. As if everyone just packed up and left. On their way out, they were joined by a very confused Yugao and Hate. They explained that everyone just walked out the front door and left. The entire group of ninja just left the temple. When asked what happened, the two explained their battle with Orochimaru and his ominous warning afterwards. Yugao and Hate agreed it was strange that he didn't just kill them or capture them, but just chalked it up to the psychotic man's delusions. With their mission strangely completed, the group left the area to deliver the package. Rubbing his forehead in frustration, Minato signed yet another document. He had almost forgotten of this hell over the 3-year break. It was the one thing he didn't miss about his duty, which is ironic, as it is most of the job. The past 2 weeks were anything other than easy for him. The forms continued coming and coming. Document after document was placed before him as soon as he retook office. It was like the workload just grew during his time away. Of course, it was expected, and he did it with a smile. Well, as much of a smile as he could give with the exhaustion from everything that had been happening. Over the 2-week period, the kids were becoming absolutely unbearable. They wanted to spend time with him every day when he got home. It seemed they became reliant on his presence during their training, so losing that constant connection threw their world for a loop. It pained him to tell them no, but he had no choice. One can only take so much stress before they give. Luckily, he had Kushina back to her normal self after a week of the revealing day. That first week after Naruto's departure, Kushina was far from her usual self. A smile on the woman was near non-existent, and for a while, it seemed like it was gone for good. Mito and Menma noticed the change in their mother as well. A week later, they asked Minato if they were getting a divorce, apparently having the same thought as Naruto. At that point, Minato knew he had to speak with her about the way she was affecting the kids. He sat her down and listened to her rant on and on about how worthless she was as a mother, and how she shouldn't have been allowed to have children in the first place. He let her pour all that negativity out to him in private as she cried on his shoulder. When she was finished, he told her of his conversation with Naruto. He explained that Naruto was truly not mad about the whole ordeal. When she couldn't accept that, he explained to her the plan he had of organizing a family vacation in a few months. They'd integrate the blonde back into their everyday routine as often as they could. Doing things like inviting him to dinner, asking him for help with the kids' training, or just spending time with them. Kushina still wasn't back to her true self, but she had started to cheer up a bit more. She began spending more and more time with her friends she had been so out of touch with. A few days after Minato's plan reveal, she felt it necessary to ask them for advice. To do so, she had to open up to them and run the risk of being judged or possibly ostracized. To her surprise, they were very supportive. Of course, disappointed in her, they understood the situation and could tell her regret was real and not just an attempt to save face. That in itself took a huge load off of Minato's shoulders. Now he was sure his wife was speaking with someone about the ordeal and was getting help. It reassured him it would be alright in the long run. Now, all he was doing was awaiting his son's return, which was still stressing him out. He read through the mission parameters and saw that there was more than a small chance they'd run into a few S-rank ninja. Their scheduled ETA was 2 days ago, but underestimating mission completion times was common, even for ANBU commanders. This was the first time he has known of one of his children actually being out on a mission. When Naruto was born, he had always imagined seeing him off on his first venture out of the village. Having missed that chance, he was giddy to see the boy return from the first one he would see. Still a strange concept that it would be from an ANBU mission, but nevertheless it would be something he'd remember forever. His anxiety only increased as the hours passed by and the day neared its end as the previous one had. He knew not every day was promised, and with ANBU, no matter how strong you are, your chances of making it back are still slim. Watching the footage of their Chunin exams battle is what put his mind at ease. Itachi and Naruto were absolutely amazing. He had never been filled with such pride in his life. Not only seeing his son using his technique, but representing his family name with pride regardless of his mistreatment. He was amazed completely, so much so that he watched it every single day. If that was their strength from just a year ago, he actually feared what they were now, adding to fact their ANBU training. They were possibly nearing the strongest pair in Konoha. That film reassured him that they would be absolutely fine, no matter who the opponent was. Well, there were a few exceptions, for ANBU agents kneeled before their Kage within the late hours of the night. Minato stood to his feet, finally seeing the one group he was dying to welcome back. "Ah, Squad 9. He said with a bit more glee in his voice than he meant to put. "Welcome back," he quipped, looking down at the one he knew was Naruto thanks to the unmistakable blonde hair. The four stood to their feet, standing at attention, awaiting the order to report. Minato, however, wasn't even completely aware of the situation yet. His smiling face was too busy admiring his son in his ANBU uniform. The pride in his eyes was visible from miles. While he whispered out, a bit louder than he planned, a cough from the commander woke him up. "Hokage-sama, my apologies, but I believe a report is due." Minato shook his head, giving a fatherly appraising nod to his son one last time. "Right, I apologize. Please report," he said, sitting back down. Hate began with explaining their few near run-ins with certain S-rank missing ninja heading up to Kusagakure, the events that happened upon their immediate arrival and the barely significant events that happened while Naruto and Itachi were inside. When he reported all he could, he passed the responsibility on to Itachi and Naruto, who then explained the events that happened during their venture into the temple, including their brief, yet brutal battle against the snake Sannin Orochimaru. At the mention of the snake, Minato sent word to retrieve Jiraiya from wherever he was. The group continued giving their report by explaining the events that happened after delivering the man back to his father, and them receiving the payment. Their trip home was apparently a lot scarcer with the S-rank nuke ninja than the trip there. With the report done, Jiraiya was ushered into the room in which Naruto and Itachi were again asked to recount their squabble with the man. It's very uncommon for him to let go such talent, Jiraiya mused as he leaned against the window sill. "Did he say anything else?" he asked the boys. "No sir, Jiraiya-sama," Itachi replied. "Just that he would be seeing us soon." Jiraiya rubbed his chin in thought. "Could be a threat towards the village," he said at last. "That's the only common ground in which he is sure they will most likely be. In that case, I propose you start looking for him instead," Minato said. "If you are to find him, do not engage until you know of his plan." Jiraiya nodded and leaped out the window to get ready for his venture out of the village once more. "As for you four, you are dismissed," he said as they bowed, giving a simultaneous shout of hi before making their exit. Tora? Stay for a second please," he called out. Naruto stood in his spot waiting for the others to file out. When it was just the two of them, Minato's smile grew tenfold. Wow! Look at you! He said, grabbing his shoulders firmly. Naruto plucked his mask from his face and smiled back as he scratched the back of his head. Ah, Toussaint. I appreciate your flattery, my boy in ANBU, he said with a chuckle, grabbing his head with his hand. I can't believe it. How was the mission? Were you hurt? He asked suddenly. No, sir. I was only inflicted with minor injuries from my battle with Orochimaru-san, he said, wiggling his now healed arm. I have some knowledge in medical jutsu, so I was successfully able to heal my injuries as well as the few imposed upon Itachi. Minato was taken back again, if at all possible. His smile increased again. You even know medical jutsu? He asked in amazement. Gosh, son, you're already more adept at the ninja arts than even me, he complimented. Naruto's bashful smile only increased from the praise his father was giving him. Ah, I am not at your level of expertise yet, Toussaint. I am merely adequate in various subjects. I have yet to master any, he said, knocking himself down a bit. Oh, you're too humble, son. I mean, you've figured out my Hiraishin. Jiraiya is a seal master and has yet to do that. Minato continued. I guess that is true, but I did so with your teaching. If I am correct, Jiraiya is attempting to reproduce the formula from scratch, he stated once again. That's right, he is. But I can't take credit for teaching you, he said as his smile faltered a bit, but held strong. Naruto noticed and reassured him. I read your description of how you engineered the seal by dissecting the formula of the Nidaime, Tobarama Senju, to make it faster and much more proficient in battle. From there, you went on to explain how it works and what you needed to do to perform the technique. All I did was follow your advice. Minato just smiled bashfully at his modest son. He begrudgingly accepted the praise he didn't feel he deserved, knowing if he refused it the boy would just argue another point. Well, you're very near surpassing this old man. That's for sure, he said with a chuckle. I'm not too sure about that, Toussaint. But if you say so. Naruto finished. Minato nodded at his son once more, his eyes still filled with pride. A few seconds of silence settled in as Minato just examined how much he reminded him of himself when he was in ANBU. Of course, he was a lot older than Naruto is, but even so, the resemblance was uncanny. Well, he said, standing up straight. I bet you're tired. Yes, sir. A few days of tree hopping has taken a lot out of my body. A good night's rest will be more than enough to replenish me fully, Naruto replied. Well, don't let me keep you, he said, extending his arm. Naruto shook his father's hand with a smile and a nod. Oh, and if you'd like, your mother would really enjoy having you over for breakfast in the morning, he said as Naruto was walking out. Slowing his pace, Naruto nodded his head. Yes, that sounds fantastic, he said, nodding on his way out. What time would be acceptable for my arrival? Oh, possibly 9, Minato replied. Naruto nodded again. Yes, sir. I will attend, he said, waving back to the man with a smile. Minato waved back at him with a smile of his own. His heart was racing for some reason. There was a warm feeling in his chest that he couldn't exactly explain. Things were going to be better now. He just knew it. The next morning, Naruto walked up the stone path leading to the front door of his old home, his black book in hand hiding his face. He was dressed in his casual wear, which was his black pants and shirt, accented by his white namikaze jacket. Knocking on the door, he heard the girly shout of his sister informing the others, I got it. He waited for a few more seconds, listening to her small feet charge towards the door. When it swung open, her eyes looked up into his. It's Nii-san, she informed. Hello, Amuto, Naruto greeted as he stepped inside. Are you here to have breakfast with us? She asked him. Naruto finished kicking his shoes off his feet. Yes, I am. He smiled at her. She smiled back. Ka-san made a big breakfast today, she said, grabbing his hand and dragging him towards the kitchen as if he didn't already know where it was. The two walked into the room in which Minato and Menma were already at the table waiting to eat. Naruto smiled when they looked his way. Hey, Nii-san, I saved you a seat, Menma yelled out, adamantly patting the seat next to his. Naruto walked over to him with a smile. Thank you, Ototo, he said. Good morning, Toussaint. Morning, son, Minato replied as he stood up to shake his hand. Your mother will be right out. She just stepped back in the kitchen to get the rest of the food, he said as Naruto looked in that direction. I think I will help, he said, walking into the kitchen. He saw his mother with her back to the door as her hands fidgeted around the counter, unsure of what to bring first. Good morning, Ka-san, Naruto greeted with a smile. Kushina yelped lowly as she spun around. Oh, Naruto-kun, she said with a clearly forced smile that was in place to hide her nervousness. To her surprise, the blonde boy that was nearing her height walked over to her and embraced her in a hug. Here, he said, grabbing her extra pair of pot holders. Let me help you. He grabbed one of the remaining 2 dishes she had on the counter and carried it out with Kushina right behind him. Ugh, finally the food's here, Mito shouted in relief. I'm starving, Menma, in his ever-present need to annoy her, quipped. You're always starving. That's all it took to kick off their first argument of the day. The others as always zoned out as Kushina and Naruto set the last two dishes down. As soon as they took their seats, everyone began serving themselves. For a while, the actual conversation remained silent as Menma and Mito continued their argument around the bites of food they inhaled. Naruto, Minato, and Kushina just listened on with different expressions. Minato in indifference, Kushina in embarrassment, and Naruto in amusement. Eventually Naruto butted in. "You two sure do fight a lot, don't you?" Mito was the first to reply. "It's Baka Menma's fault. He's always annoying me," she said, shoveling another mouthful into her face. "Yeah, right. It's always her who starts it," he refuted, completely disregarding the blatant fact that it was actually him who started it this time. Kushina pushed the hair from her face and coughed into her hand to draw attention to herself. "Menma, please use your inside voice." Menma knew it was meant in a much more threatening way than it was said and shrunk back into his seat a little bit. Naruto noticed and chuckled at the commanding power of his mother. "You know Ka-san," he said, grabbing her attention. "You may just be the scariest mom in Konoha." She smiled bashfully as she knew it was meant as a compliment. Although, some of the Nara children could argue it is in fact Yoshino-sama, Kushina smiled. "Oh, Yasuno's actually pretty nice if you get to know her, indeed. I have only briefly met her, but during that time, she was looking for her son, Shikamaru, with a frying pan in hand. I am sure what happened when she caught him was far from pleasant," he said, smiling. Kushina smiled at that. Minato chose then to add in. "I'd throw in Mikoto into that wager as well." "What?" "Mikoto-chan isn't that bad," Kushina said. Minato chuckled. I've heard stories." Kushina chuckled as well. She knew her best friend was a bit fear-inducing at times, but it wasn't to an extreme degree. The duration of the family breakfast went by without a hitch after the conversation was started. They spoke of all kinds of things from the old missions Minato and Kushina had been on, to Naruto's first mission. They were for a brief moment a normal family like they were supposed to be. That fact alone is what put Kushina's mind at rest. For the first part of the meal, she was still a bit timid about Naruto's uncaring attitude at his neglect. But now, she was feeling as though they were closer than ever, which of course they were. The family event came to an end when Minato finally had to head to work, leaving Kushina and the kids at the house. With their newfound energy from the meal, they begged Kushina to let them show Naruto how strong they had gotten. Kushina at first denied the request, explaining to them that Naruto was too tired from the long 2-week mission he had just come back from, but Naruto told her it was fine. Now, the three stood in the backyard. Kushina sat on the porch as she watched Menma and Mito face off against their older brother who, much as Kakashi often did to them, pulled out a book to read as a way to infuriate them. She chuckled at their frustrated expressions, finding it cute that they still let it get to them. Their teamwork was clearly present in an attempt at least as Mito went around Naruto so that they could attack him from different directions. "Don't underestimate us, Ni-san," yelled Menma as he threw a kunai his way charging in behind it. Without looking up, Naruto smiled and plucked the kunai out of the air with ease. Tossing it over his shoulder, he could hear Mito jump out of the way. Catching Menma's wild haymaker, Naruto shifted his body over slightly, causing the blonde to sail over his shoulder, crashing into his sister. "Ugh! Menma Baka! Get out of my way!" she yelled, pushing him over as she charged the blonde with his back to her. She went for a roundhouse kick to his face from the back that he simply put his free hand up to block. Catching her ankle, he yanked her gently as she flipped to stay upright. Menma went in for a drop kick that Naruto stepped out of the way of. Sadly for Menma, Mito had been going for an axe kick that he didn't see. Her heel came crashing down on his chest. "Ah! Quit hitting me! You idiot!" he yelled at her. "Then get out of the way!" She yelled back, flipping to her feet and squaring off against Naruto in her taijutsu stance. Naruto just kept reading his book. When Mito charged, she pulled a kunai midway to her target. Naruto, still without looking, dodged each of her attacks as he poked at the back of her hand with taps she found to be completely ineffective. That is until her kunai slipped from her hand and she instead tried to punch him in his face. Naruto didn't dodge it. In doing so, she jammed 3 of her fingers. Jumping back, she finally noticed her hand, for some unknown reason, refused to close. Menma came in next with a Rasengan at full blast. Naruto awaited the attack and leaned slightly out of the way, delivering a jab towards Menma's bicep. Instantly, the ball of chakra dispersed, and he was sent stumbling forward. As he tried to catch himself, he realized only his left arm would move. His right just wouldn't extend, in fact he couldn't even feel it anymore. He looked over at Mito who was still cradling her unresponsive hand. Without saying anything, both of them knew the other was done, and so did Naruto. "You two are not bad at all. Individually you could outclass most anyone in your class, but your teamwork is poor. So poor, I doubt you'd be able to function properly on a battlefield in any situation." They both looked down in shame. "Konoha operates mainly on teamwork. It will be your most valuable skill when it's time to become active ninja." "He is right, you two. Your father has told you this as well before," Kushina added from the side. Hearing it from Naruto should drive that point home. "Yes, Ka-san. The two replied simultaneously. The group was surprised when an ANBU agent dropped down next to Naruto. He whispered something into his ear in which Naruto nodded at. When the man shunshined away, Naruto addressed the others. "It would seem I have been requested elsewhere," he said as he walked up, grabbing onto Mito's hand and Menma's shoulder. Green chakra encased his hands. When it died out, the two rolled out their respective injuries in amazement, as they could now move them again. Naruto walked back towards the porch to bid his mother a good day. "Thank you, Ka-san, for the amazing breakfast. It was as great as I had remembered it." He embracing her in a hug. "Thank you, Naruto. You're always welcome to join us whenever you want to," she replied as he nodded with a smile. Waving on his way out, he left the compound to whatever it was he was called to, leaving Kushina, Mito and Menma to continue their training with a new plan. Focus on teamwork. Hours later, the night sky swallowed the remnants of Konoha's daily activity, handing the reins over to the nightlife of bar hopping or late-night dinner dates. It was around this time that Naruto and Itachi were walking out of the ANBU HQ. A whole day spent listening to briefing after briefing, the two were exhausted and hungry. Their feet brought them towards the side of town that held many of the family-friendly restaurants and stands. They were still discussing the topics they were briefed on over the hour-long meeting. It was a mandatory, last-minute event that was originally just to congratulate and send off the newly retired ANBU captain, Kenji Horo. The man was handing down the title to another one of their superior officers, and a former student of his, Commander Omaru Yosha. From there, the speaker decided then would be the best time to not only refresh the group on the regulations set by Shikaku Nara during his brief time as acting Hokage, but also inform them of the regulations the Yondaime had added to the mix. Naruto wondered the entire time just how long his father had been working on such a thing. With all of that nonsense out of the way, the two boys were on their way to enjoy themselves a nice meal somewhere. They just couldn't decide where. In their venture to find a place suitable enough to appease their immense hunger, they ran into someone that Itachi immediately wished they had not. "Hey Itachi-kun." A girl with black hair and eyes to match said as she and a man resembling her perfectly walked over towards the duo. "Hello, Naruto-san, Izumi." "Hello?" Naruto quipped with a friendly smile that held a hint of devious intent that Itachi noticed. What a wonderful surprise. Itachi saw the gleam in the blonde's eyes from the side of his own, but decided not to react, as doing so may actually cause the blonde to do something Itachi didn't want. "Hello, Izumi-chan, Komiya-san," he said, addressing her and her father. "Hello to you two as well, Itachi and Naruto," the man said with a smile. "What are you two doing out so late?" Itachi asked curiously. Izumi looked a little hurt by the question for some reason. "Well, it's my birthday and all, so Two-san was teaching me a new technique." Itachi stiffened, almost unnoticeably at the mention of the girl's birthday. He had completely forgotten about it with the day's chaotic events. Trying to play it with indifference, he simply nodded, hoping no one noticed his subtle reaction. Of course, he knew for a fact one person did without a doubt. "Well," Naruto said, breaking the awkward silence that settled following Itachi's silent reply. "I wish you a happy birthday. I must apologize, as I had almost completely forgotten about the joyous occasion this morning as we were heading to our meeting. Almost of course, as Itachi was there to bug me about it the whole way through," he said, covering for his friend flawlessly. Itachi mentally thanked his friend for being so aware and helpful. He watched as Izumi's eyes lit up in happiness as her father laughed. He had no words as he simply smiled and accepted the story Naruto had made for his cover-up. "Komiya-sama, may I ask of you the honor of having your daughter join us for dinner tonight, as a way of both making it up to Izumi and repaying Itachi for reminding me?" Naruto asked with his ever-present intellectual speech pattern. Komiya looked at Izumi's pleading eyes and then at the faces of the two boys. "Well, if it were anyone else, I'd say no. But with Itachi and the son of the Yondaime, I am sure she is in good hands," he said with a nod. "You kids have fun." With that said, he walked off, leaving the three kids standing in the street, two of them in embarrassment, and the other in wonder. They all sat in a booth at the Akimichi Bar and Grill. Naruto sat on one side as Izumi and Itachi sat on the other, trying their hardest to avoid each other's eye contact. Naruto was once again stuck in the book Itachi had bought for him, and Itachi was at that moment cursing the book for capturing the blonde's attention so intently. It was a bit of a paradox, as when it came to Naruto, he could get any conversation going with ease, but with his limited human interaction outside of books, he knew very little on what questions or topics were appropriate for certain situations. His current fear was that the blonde would start talking and he'd ask Izumi something stupid that would pit them as a couple. A fear he wouldn't admit was that he'd ask that question and she'd be speaking of someone else when she answered. Glancing over at her hand that was laid out on the table, he noticed a few scorch marks around her fingers. He smiled as he immediately knew the technique she had been working on, as he had the same injuries at one time. To his satisfaction and discomfort, the food finally arrived. The discomfort came as he knew Naruto's table etiquette would prevent him from reading during a meal. Reading at the table was no crime, but reading once the food arrived was taboo. When the waitress passed out the individual plates and took her leave, the table was covered in silence. The only sound coming from the clanking of their shifting glasses and the chattering of the other patrons. Naruto hadn't noticed as he was stuck on a very good part in his book. The silence was incredibly uncomfortable, and he could just sense their collective discomfort. With his extensive knowledge of these circumstances, he planned for a joke. Seeing as Itachi was the table's common ground, he'd use him as the focal point. "So, Izumi-san," he began. "You are finally 12 years of age?" Izumi swallowed the food in her mouth so that she could answer. Nodding her head and covering her mouth to prevent excess food from flying out. "Yes, I am," she said, glad someone had finally said something. "Well, that just leaves little Itachi here, huh?" he said, nudging at the boy's age, receiving a chuckle from Izumi. Itachi executed the Uchiha infamous HN at the jab. "For just 3 more weeks," he argued. "Ah, you're still a baby for 3 more weeks," Izumi added, receiving a chuckle from the blonde across the table and a deadpan look from the brunette. "I appear to be the most mature at this table," he said with a face of indifference, but they could both tell there was a hint of amusement or relief in his voice. "Besides, you two are merely a few months older than me," he said. "Astute observation," Naruto remarked. "I am only joking. You will get it when you are older," he said as he and Izumi cackled up at Itachi's look of annoyance. As he has been doing more and more recently, Naruto successfully broke the tense silence that the table was drenched in upon their arrival. Then, when everything got rolling and he finished his meal, he pulled out his book and simply listened to the two flirt with each other for the next hour or two. He found it to be something unique to see up close. The blossoming of love was being played out before his eyes. In a book he read, the author explained his own theory of the concept of love as being our human minds becoming over-infatuated with another person to a degree that is dangerous in a self-implosion standpoint. Naruto took that as saying falling in love was the equivalent of dooming yourself to death. For if you fell in love with someone weaker and you lose them, your judgment is clouded, and you are no longer who you were as you fight for one thing and one thing only: vengeance. Looking at the two from where he was sitting, Naruto felt it was a possibility that seemed to present itself at this very moment. There was a piece of him that didn't want their relationship to flourish, not out of jealousy, strictly for the safety of his best friend. He didn't have too many real connections in this world, so this was one he couldn't lose. Having Itachi for a friend is what fed Naruto's belief that any man could be more than the selfish and cruel creatures he's seen in his life. For Itachi is a killer. Not a murderer, just a man following orders, but a killer nonetheless. For a boy who has taken countless lives to retain the pieces of him that keep him human, Naruto was convinced that Itachi was a light within this dim world he's come accustomed to. Itachi inspired him to see through the pain and sorrow and to look towards the future. The future being the next generation. Before meeting Itachi, Naruto was a hateful individual. Not verbally, but he was very pessimistic in his way of thinking. Of course, for a lonely little boy, it was an inevitable outcome. Then he met the boy without a smile, but with lots of love. For a while, they butt heads with their clashing ideals, but eventually, Naruto was shown something so beautiful, his heart was touched with a grip of warmth he hadn't felt in years. A new way of viewing the shitty things that happened on a daily basis. Ironically, it was a few days after their first kill, the day in which he believed Itachi would see his views, and realize how cruel and vicious human beings are. Something he himself had read in his books. To his surprise, while following his partner, he watched him interact with people as if nothing had happened. He expected Itachi to seclude himself much as he had the first day. He expected him to stray far away from family, for fear of them witnessing the monster he had become. In his childlike mind, he believed Itachi was just naive to the core. He felt that he just didn't understand what it was he had done. When he got the chance, he approached him with a heated argument, trying to convince him he was a monster like he felt himself. All Itachi said was that he was not. When he stood up and began walking away, Naruto was almost compelled to follow him. When they finally stopped, they were standing on a cliff overlooking the woods. Naruto was confused to the reason they were up there. He just watched as the brunette stared out at nothing. He asked him what it was they were supposed to be looking for, but Itachi just told him, "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Naruto tried to see what it was he was talking about, but all he saw were scarred-up trees and people yelling at each other. When he spoke on it, Itachi only smiled and said, "You only see what you wish to. But it is worth saying that you know what ugly looks like, therefore you must know beauty as well." With those wise words, he turned and walked away, leaving the blonde standing at the top of that cliff seeing things a lot clearer than he had just a few moments ago. It's like saying there can't truly be darkness if there is no light to compare it to. Those words got him thinking over everything he had come to hate. He hated the people that fought each other, but then he remembered seeing people that were in love, and how happy they were. He hated seeing people die, but he remembered when Mito and Menma were born. He hated his family for leaving him all alone, but he remembered the amazing times they had in the past. He was brought to his own conclusion about the concept of mankind. We hate something only when we once loved it dearly. And if you once loved something dearly, forgiveness is as easy as remembering what you loved before. Naruto feared for his friend, but at the same time couldn't have been happier. For once, he was getting to see his friend genuinely, truly happy. Something he has noticed was becoming more and more scarce. There was another book he read in which the author gave his own description of love as the emotional embodiment of peak human strength. Yet, at the same time, our greatest weakness. A paradox in the truest sense. In both cases, he noticed the outcome of death. Never directly said, but implied both times. Death was inevitable, and in the line of work that he was accustomed to, he knew better than most that death affects the living more so than the dead. But over the time spent with the two in less awkward situations, he became close to Izumi as well. So, the fear of one of their deaths became a lot more worrying. Breaking him from his thoughts was a head of silver hair poking out at a booth a few away from theirs. Thinking it was Kakashi, he almost called out to the man. When the guy stood to his feet, it wasn't him. Glad he dodged that awkward conversation, he went back to reading. Again, interrupting his musing was Izumi standing to her feet. It's getting late. I better get home. She waved to the two boys with a smile. Thank you guys so much. This was the most fun I've had all day. Naruto nodded at her with a smile. Itachi, however, stood to his feet as well. I will walk you home, he said as they bid Naruto a good night. Naruto returned the gesture and headed home himself. He couldn't wait to see what their relationship developed into. Something exquisitely dangerous, he presumed. 2 years later, Naruto, now 14, stood outside the academy with his hands in his pockets. His appearance hadn't changed much over the past 2 years. It hadn't changed at all, actually. The only key differences being his gain in height and the loss of his once favorite jacket. He simply grew out of it, so he gave it to Minato to one day give to Menma when he could fit it. Other than that, nothing had changed. His hair was still the same, with the right side still shaven down more so than the rest. He still wore his black t-shirt and ANBU pants with black sandals. An addition to his ever-present look, however, was the necklace he wore that brandished the Uzumaki spiral symbol, a gift from his mother for his recent birthday a few months back. You could argue another addition was the new book he had shoved into his face. After so many years of reading and rereading the one he received from his friend all those years ago, people had come to associate it with his apparel. This book was green. As he read his new novel, he noticed the parents and other adult commoners beginning to chatter and mutter among themselves in awe. Looking to see what the commotion was, he turned to see Itachi walking his way. The brunette hadn't changed in the slightest. He still wore the same Uchiha high-collared shirt with his ANBU pants and sandals, and he still maintained that ponytail of his. His fame within the village was the only thing that altered. Itachi became the true essence of what it meant to be a Konoha shinobi. He was recognized publicly throughout the village for his accomplishment of making ANBU commander at the ripe age of 13, just a few months ago. Ever since, his popularity was rivaling that of the Hokage himself, which is a position most people said he was close to reaching. Hello, Naruto, Itachi said, leaning against the wall next to the blonde as he waved at the group of parents waiting on their children to get out. Hello to you as well, Itachi, Naruto replied, not looking up from his book. Here for Sasuke? Yes. My mother is attending Yoshino-sama's baby shower as well, he replied as the blonde nodded. That was the reason he was going to be taking Mito and Menma for the remainder of the day. What do you have planned for them? Itachi asked. Naruto looked up in thought. I am unsure. I imagined a bit of training and possibly something to eat a little later. Would you mind us joining? Izumi and I are watching over Sasuke for the day as well, Naruto nodded. Of course. I must confess, I was not too interested in trying to entertain Mito and Menma all day anyways. Not alone, that is. Itachi chuckled at that, understanding completely. With a resonating slam, the doors of the academy swung open. Kid after kid funneled out to their waiting parents, or began their journey home with their friends. All of course pausing at the spectacle that was Itachi Uchiha. Eventually, the class holding all of the clan children was finally released. Sasuke was one of the first kids out. After greeting Naruto, Itachi said they were going to go on ahead and pick up Izumi and that they'd meet up later. And there, Naruto waited with his book in hand, unaware of the leering eyes upon his form. Eventually Mito and Menma came out and immediately began explaining their day down to the minor details. Naruto just listened in false interest all the way back to the Namake's compound. When they arrived, Naruto began their training by having them do their normal warm-up routine while he read his book. When they finished, he instructed them to work on their chakra control by performing the tree climbing exercise as they balanced a leaf on their foreheads simultaneously. They were of course disappointed as they were hoping for something a bit more deadly. Or at least new. To get them to work twice as hard, he told them if they worked hard enough, he would show them a technique so amazing that it could beat anyone within seconds. He was of course blowing smoke, but they didn't have to know that. It did have the desired effect of further motivating them, as they pushed themselves twice as hard as they would have. When all that was said and done, they were finally joined by Itachi, Izumi, and Sasuke. Okay guys, Naruto said, dropping off of the tree he was resting in. I think that's about enough training. What? Menma yelled, still out of breath. What about our super amazing technique? Naruto looked at Itachi in amusement. Oh yeah, that. Well, that is for another day. You guys are too tired now. Besides, we're gonna go eat. What's the technique? Sasuke asked Itachi in a low whisper. Itachi just chuckled, never giving a formal answer. Naruto and I, are you gonna take us to the party? Mito asked. Naruto just looked at her in questioning. It's Ino's birthday, they're having it at the Akimichi Grill House. She informed him. No! I don't want to go to that. Menma protested. It's nothing but a bunch of stupid girls. You're stupid! Mito yelled back, kicking off a fresh back and forth verbal fight between the two that the others ignored. Naruto sighed and looked over to Sasuke to break the tie. What do you think, Sasuke? Would you like to go to the party, or would you rather us go elsewhere to eat? Sasuke, at first, was going to say no, but the look Mito gave him told him she'd be heartbroken if he did. He didn't care for her much, but he'd rather not make a girl cry. I guess it wouldn't hurt. Maybe we will see some of our friends there too, he said, directing that last sentence at Menma, who crossed his arms in defeat. And from there, the group headed out to the Akimichi Grill House. The happy birthday song just ended when the group finally made it. Cake was being served and they saw everyone else had probably already eaten. Well, Naruto said. We could just get a table and order then, but Ni-san? Mito said, looking up at him. I want cake. You have not eaten yet, Amuto. It would be unwise to. Oh, come on, Naruto. Itachi said, just let them eat cake for dinner. Naruto looked down at Mito's pleading eyes and at Menma, who, despite trying to stay mad, was looking over at the huge cake in hunger. I suppose it would not be so bad, he said, sending them off. The three ran into the party section, in which one of the moms helping handed them a party hat and a plate so that they could get their slice. Naruto and the Uchiha couple found a seat towards the back of the restaurant. Naruto sat with his back to the wall as to keep an eye on his two siblings. Hard to do with the book now shoved into his face. Itachi and Izumi were having their own conversation over something he had no interest or knowledge in, so he just continued reading. Every now and then, he'd glance up to make sure everything was still okay. A few times he had thought he saw Kakashi again, but couldn't get a good enough look. The night's events went on as they usually did, with Naruto joining in the conversation as they ate their food and then seamlessly melding into his book, leaving the two once again to talk of their own things in virtual privacy. A few minutes went by and Naruto peeked over to the party again, wondering when it was going to be over. He had assumed it would be over rather quickly upon their tardy arrival, but they were still going at it. Sticking his nose back into his book, he continued reading until he finally heard the sound of child footsteps jogging towards their table. Looking up, he was greeted to the sight of Mito and another girl jogging up to the table, with the Hyuga heiress being dragged along as well. Naruto and I! Mito yelled as she and the other two girls stood at their table. Itachi and Izumi stopped their conversation to watch the spectacle. I want you to meet my friends, she said happily as Naruto raised an eyebrow. I always tell you to meet them, but you're always too busy, she said, mimicking his voice to the best of her ability. Naruto closed his book with an amused expression. Well, okay then, he said, sitting straighter in his seat. The pink-haired girl was the first to respond. I'm Sakura Haruno, she said, extending her hand to the blonde. It's nice to meet you. I hope you're better than that Baka Menma, she said with a grimace. Naruto smiled at the girl. It is lovely to meet you, Sakura-san. I am Naruto, he said, disregarding her remark about his brother, chalking it up to her possibly being one of Menma's pranking victims. With that said, the group sat in silence, until Mito finally lost her patience. Ugh! Come on, Hinata. He won't bite, she said. Hinata slowly crept out from behind the redhead. I am Hinata Hyuga, she said, saying her last name so low it was almost inaudible. Naruto extended his hand to her as well, which she took timidly. It is an honor to meet you, Hinata-san, Naruto said with a reassuring smile that made her face heat up. There, said Mito with a smile. Now you know all my friends. Except for Ino. She went to the bathroom, she said, craning her head around the room, trying to spot the blonde. When she did, she quickly flagged her down. Ino! Over here! The whole group looked her way for a brief second before Mito began talking again. Ino's heart was racing sporadically as she made her way over to the table, much more Hinata-like than she was comfortable with. On her way, she quickly ripped the birthday hat off of her head, throwing it onto some nearby table as she fixed her hair. When she finally made it over, she waited for Mito to finish whatever rant she was on as she discreetly examined the boy that melted her confidence down without even knowing it. His eyes were locked onto Mito with a soft smile that she couldn't help but stare at. And this, Mito began, breaking her from her daze. Is Ino, aka the birthday girl. Pulling her hand from behind her back for the briefest of waves, not directed at any of the table's occupants, she whispered a quick, hey that was so out of character for her. Mito looked at her strangely. Oh, so you're the birthday girl? Izumi asked in apparent excitement, in which Ino nodded at. That's so cute, she said, gushing at the innocence of the blonde. In other words, demeaning her age considerably. How old are you? Clearing her throat so that she didn't stutter, she answered. 10. Well, happy birthday, Izumi said kindly with a smile. I too wish you a happy birthday, Itachi added. Ino threw the two a quick thank you as she tucked her bang behind her ear. Ino, said Mito, grabbing her attention. She looked over at her, seeing she was gesturing towards Naruto. This is my brother Naruto. Naruto was already reaching forward to shake the girl's hand. It is very nice to his statement stopped there as his nearly empty cup of water was now running down his leg, having been knocked down by the very shaky-handed girl. Oh no! Ino said in worry. I am so sorry. Luckily the cup wasn't full so there wasn't much of it. Naruto simply waved her off. It is quite alright. It was only a bit of water. No harm done, he said, extending his hand again. Ino reached a lot more gently this time as to not embarrass herself further. I wish you a very happy birthday, Ino-san. If I am not mistaken, it would seem your father is preparing to leave, he said, giving her an escape. She looked over to see him paying the bill. Quickly she bid the group bye as a whole and ran for him. Mito just raised her eyebrow at the strange occurrence. She had never seen the blonde act like that. How weird, she whispered to herself. 3 years later, perched in a tree, an ANBU member looked into the window of a secluded house. The rain above doing well at muffling the screaming from within. His form was completely hidden within the shadow of the top of the tree above him, only being illuminated briefly by the flashes of lightning that struck sporadically. In his hand, his black sword held in a reverse grip. The ANB watched the men guarding the house walk along a very strict pattern, not bothered by the rain in the slightest. Their weapons lazily held at the ready for anyone foolish enough to attack. They had no idea that their death was a mere 10 feet away, shifting his feet ready to pounce. When he did, they were gone before they even knew it. He went for the nearest guy first, slicing his throat before grabbing his body, laying him down gently. Then, he jumped up to the ledge the other was on. The guard was a ways away when he turned around. It was right at that moment that a flash of lightning hit, illuminating the ANBU's form and the sword flying at his head for a brief second. The very last thing he would see, the ANBU ran by, ripping his sword from the man's head before jumping feet first into the tiny window that he barely made it through. When he landed, he realized how lucky he was as a guard had just passed by not 5 seconds before he jumped in and was already walking away. He snuck up behind him and snapped his neck in one clean motion. Shoving the body into the nearby closet, he continued on silently. He could hear a man screaming from the basement of the mansion. He made his way towards it, killing 2 more guards on his way. Suddenly, he heard the screaming man abruptly stop. Having the target located, he continued on, gently opening the door. Once inside, he saw a brown-haired man in a lab coat, cleaning materials from the last experiment he was undergoing. He silently walked in. When the doctor reached over to set his scalpel down on the wooden nightstand, his hand was impaled by a kunai, nailing him to the surface, electing a scream of pain from him. H. Ah! The man turned around and plucked the blade from his hand as he scrambled around the table. He pulled a tag out and wrapped it around the kunai. There was a very small hole at the top of the ceiling that led outside. Aiming right, he threw it as hard as he could. To his horror, it was plucked out the air. Horror because it was an explosive tag meant to alert his unknowingly dead guards. He watched as the ANBU held the blade in his hand. It briefly emitted a blue light before the man dropped it carelessly to the ground. Yako Toshi, you have been sentenced to death by the Council of Konoha for the abduction and murder of over 100 individuals taking residence within the borders of the Land of Fire. With that said, the black blade ended the pleas of the man with a quick slash that cleanly removed his head from the rest of his body. With his mission completed, the ANBU left the mansion and took to the trees, leaving no trace of him being there other than a few dead bodies that were set aflame. Hours later, the ANBU agent stood in front of his locker, stripping his armor from his body. The last thing he removed was his mask. He now stood in his street clothes. A set that hadn't changed since he was young. Black t-shirt, black pants, and black sandals with his necklace dangling in the middle of his chest. Exhaustion in his eyes and a sore body to go along with it, he shut his locker. Walking out of the locker room, the 17-year-old trudged through the gray hall down until he reached the head commander's quarters where he was told to go when he returned. Wordlessly, he knocked on the door awaiting the command to enter. When the voice called out to him, he opened the door and slowly walked in. He took a seat in the chair opposite the man across the desk. A bald man with cold black eyes, Captain Yosha, pierced into his own blues with a false bravado that made a fair attempt at masking his sympathy. Namikaze, he began, stopping as he lost the words he was prepared to say, losing himself in the cold seas in the teen's eyes. Aya, how are you doing? He asked suddenly. The blonde had absolutely no movement, not a single blink. I am well, Captain Yosha, he replied with slight fluctuations in his tone. His lack of physical expression making it a much creepier response than it was meant to be. How are you? The captain looked at him in curiosity, not even attempting to hide the fact that he didn't believe him. I'm fine. Naruto, the reason you are here today is because a few of your comrades have expressed their worry when working with you. They say you've become more reckless than you usually are. Naruto held his motionless visage. What a strange grievance, he remarked. Well, until you have seen Inoichi-san for evaluation, I am afraid I must place you on leave, Captain Yosha said, noticing the very slight reaction of the blonde's jaw clenching up. Once you are cleared in your evaluation, you may return to service. Please turn in your mask. He finished as he began filling out documents, accenting the fact that the conversation was not up for debate. Naruto stared at the wall and thought for a few more seconds. Standing up, he pulled his mask from his back pouch and set it down onto his desk. "I bid you a good day, Captain Yosha," he said as he turned to leave, receiving only a grunt of confirmation. Walking through the street, he looked up into the shower of the rain above him, shutting his eyes to protect them from the falling droplets. Hands in his pockets and no destination in mind, he strolled along in silence. Nothing to distract himself. It was another day of feeling absolutely exhausted. Feeling undeniably drained, yet being unable to keep himself from doing something, anything that could cloud his mind. The past 3 years were the most eventful years of his life. It was expected, however, as his family was very unique. Mito and Menma becoming genin last year seemed to be where it started. They were thrown on a team with Sasuke, of course, and were handed over to Kakashi. Their rookie class became renowned among the village just a few months ago due to their performance within the Chunin exams. The event went off without a hitch and came down, surprisingly, to some extremely great matches during the semifinals. Eventually, his brother claimed victory over the entire competition. Aside from that, the kids always seemed to find themselves in some very interesting altercations. From fending off A-rank ninja, to saving important individuals, the list went on and on. Life went on and on, no matter what happened, it went on and on. Through the years, Naruto has known many emotions and has experienced them himself. He's felt fear, anger, joy, content, happiness, but the one thing he lacked to a very extreme degree was love. It had been absent within his heart, as he watched those around him become ensnared in it. Seeing Itachi and Izumi moving in together, watching as his younger brother slowly fell in love with the pink-haired girl he had met all those years ago. Even the budding romance of Sasuke and Mito. To Naruto, it seemed as though love was all around, yet out of his reach. For he was always around people that overshadowed him. Whether it be Itachi, Menma, or even his father who seemed to just refuse to age. He had come to terms with it a long time ago. He was jealous, not of their significant others specifically, but of the admiration they received. He was just as accomplished as anyone, yet he wasn't seen, wasn't heard, he wasn't even really noticed. It was just like before. His life was on a constant cycle of never being someone's main priority or focus. It was a selfish desire he had a few years back, when there weren't any other problems to focus on. That was something he found strange. Why is it that certain things become problems due to a simple lack of conflict? When he was in his pessimistic state of mind, his problems were a lot deeper than a simple lack of affection. But as soon as he made peace with that part of himself, small things became the things he obsessed on. It's almost as if we, as human beings, thrive on struggle more so than anything. It was a possible theory that would explain most of what we do. We search for love, because love ultimately and eventually incites conflict in some way. We go to war in hopes of being alive long enough to tell our story. All for the sake of proving our own worth by making it through more traumatizing experiences than any other. As if that would somehow make you a better person than whoever it is you try and talk down on. A crazy theory he had, of course, but it was something that was definitely a possibility. Regardless, he craved that level of human interaction more so than anything. He wanted to be important to someone in some way. He wanted the villagers to admire him the way they did Itachi. He made it to ANBU at 11 years old too, so where was his congratulations? He wanted to be respected like Menma. I mean, they shared the same last name. The same resemblance to the man they associated him with. Why wasn't he treated like a celebrity? Was he wrong for feeling that way? If you had asked him a few months ago, the answer would have been a resounding yes. It was completely wrong to be so selfish. The optimistic views instilled in him by his friend contorted his mind into some kind of newfound naivety that he doubted he ever had to begin with. Itachi's words to him that day were misinterpreted. To Naruto, Itachi was saying to always look towards the positive side of things instead of focusing on the negative. After a few weeks of practicing the new tactic, it became second nature. It became a part of his mentality altogether. Now he knew, Itachi wasn't saying to only focus on the positive. He was saying to look towards the positive while being aware of the negative. Naruto just cut the latter off completely, blinding himself from the world around him. But just like the character in his new book, the world just seemed to laugh at him. His new book explained his situation fairly well. It was just a continuous series of bad events that broke him down mentally and physically. A constant stream of misfortune that seemed too chronological to be random. The world was punishing him for something he had never done. He didn't understand why, or what to do because of it. The premise of the book involved the antagonist explaining how easily it is for a sane man to end up just like him. How easy it is for one to lose their mind. It was a detective novel, of course, that involved the protagonist searching high and low for the insane man, but for some reason, the antagonist stole the story. It was a dark book that discussed a lot of topics going on in today's society, and the great wars of the past. Naruto had read it at least 100 times through since he got it. He was reading it right now, in fact, as he memorized every line of every page. A rare find for him, he fell in love with the story. Stopping at last, he was in front of the interrogation building, which is where the psychological evaluations were also underwent. He trudged into the building, not worried about the wet state of his clothes as he noticed the ground was wet regardless. He walked through the building until he reached the office of the head psychiatric doctor, Inoichi Yamanaka. He knocked on the door. Hearing the muffled enter from inside, he opened the door. Inoichi was finishing paperwork, until he glanced up quickly to see the blonde. "Ah, Naruto," he said, finishing the document. Naruto took a seat in the chair in front of his desk. Just as he had earlier that morning, he waited patiently, motionlessly. When Inoichi finally set his paperwork aside, he sat up straighter in his seat with his fingers interlocked on the desk in front of him. "I was not expecting to see you so soon." "Hello, Inoichi-san." Naruto greeted the man. Still that false fluctuation riddling his voice that just did not go well with the frozen look he displayed. Inoichi intently examined the boy, trying to see some physical indicators that would possibly interfere with the examination. He didn't have to look far, as his eyes said it all. It looked as if he hadn't slept in days. Trying to see if maybe the boy just wanted to speak of something else before he sent him on his way, Inoichi began. "So, what can I help you with? I was told to receive an evaluation from yourself, Inoichi-san. A few of my coworkers fear I am unfit to serve," he explained. Inoichi just watched him attentively. His eyes traveled his form, noting all of the small signs that just screamed that the kid was not right. Nodding his head slowly, Inoichi pulled his documents back to the center of his desk. "Well, I am very sorry to say, but I cannot give you a proper evaluation. You are too tired for it to be an accurate assumption. What do you say you come back next week, and we'll do it then?" "I am fine, Inoichi-san," Naruto said in hopes of changing his mind. Inoichi nodded as he went back to signing documents. "I am sure. We'll find out next week." Days later, he laid in his bedroom, staring at his ceiling from the surface of his bed. The last few days melded together, becoming essentially the same day. He hadn't left his apartment since leaving Inoichi's office that night. There was nowhere to go. No one to see. He refused to walk through the streets anymore, as all that awaited him were side glances and chatter that he just knew were about him. The new pariah of the village he was. All he had left was his family's backing, which wasn't much when they were all gone. Jiraiya and Kushina took Mito and Menma on a training trip for an undetermined period of time. They had been gone for a few months now, missing the events that happened since. What was it that happened? Well, the deaths of Itachi and Izumi Uchiha, of course. It was a true tragic story that had a twisted ending. Naruto couldn't explain it to anyone, because no one believed him. All they knew was that he killed them, but they didn't know the story. The true story, in a condensed version, is that Izumi Uchiha was captured by a man that had given them fair warning before. Orochimaru captured the girl while she was out on a mission with her team. When the others returned with the news, Naruto was out on a mission of his own. By the time he got back, Itachi had already gone out to look for her, abandoning his status as a Konoha ninja to do so. Naruto pleaded with his father to go and assist him, which Minato reluctantly agreed. Naruto tracked his best friend to a somewhat hidden base along the outskirts of Kusa. When he showed up, Itachi was sitting in the middle of the floor in what seemed to be an arena of sorts. Naruto called out to him, but he didn't respond. Instantly, he knew something was happening. Itachi turned on him and attacked him out of the blue. He wouldn't explain why, he just began attacking. Naruto adamantly tried to explain that he wasn't there to take him back. He tried to explain that he was there to help, but Itachi continued attacking him with the clear intent to kill. They battled for hours on end, with Naruto trying all he could to calm his friend down. In their hour-long battle, Itachi told Naruto of the circumstances set for him by the snake's Sannin. He gave him an ultimatum: either kill Naruto Namikaze, or he would kill Izumi. Naruto nearly convinced him that if they were to work together, they could kill the snake and save her. But as luck would have it, Orochimaru showed up with a knife to the girl's throat. Itachi realized there was no chance of saving her other than doing as the man said and ending his friend's life. With a heavy heart set in stone, he continued the battle. Izumi's pleading in the background held most of his attention. The battle could have gone on forever with Naruto just dodging Itachi's attacks. Naruto at first thought it was a poor plan by the snake for the simple fact that he held no leverage over him. What drove the point home that this was supposed to be a death match is the next person he brought out. A bound and gagged Mito with tears streaming down her face. Immediately, Naruto wondered how in the hell the slithery man could have gotten his hands on her. He at first tried to rush the snake to get her back. In doing so, a barrier shot up around the room, officially setting the arena as the snake kicked his feet up to watch the spectacular battle that was bound to happen. A spectacular battle it was. The two held nothing back as they fought for their hearts, influenced by the wails of crying coming from the two girls to save them. Eventually Naruto got the upper hand and was able to kill his friend. The last thing Itachi saw before he died was Izumi's throat being slit. Naruto's soul broke completely witnessing the death of his two best friends, one of which was by his own hands. Never before had a kill made him feel so cold. The only way he could keep himself together was the thought of him saving his sister. That illusion broke as well. When the barrier dropped, Naruto looked up to the balcony to see not one, but two cynical smiles staring down at him. Orochimaru chuckled at the blonde's confusion. Naruto's teary eyes were plastered on Mito as she shared the same smile while standing next to the snake. To his shock and horror, her appearance changed into a man he read about in the bingo books. Not famously known, but an ability very impressive. 100 Transformation Kazan. Orochimaru and his associate escaped before the barrier fell. By the time it did, the heartbroken Naruto had no will or strength left to search for the duo. Instead, he carried the bodies of his friends all the way back to the village. Upon arrival, the people mourned the death of the village-famous couple. Their questions demanded answers. It was meant to be confidential, but a leak from the ANBU guarding the Hokage during Naruto's mission report began the spread of the rumor that was partially true. Within weeks, everyone knew that Naruto Namikaze killed Itachi Uchiha. They just didn't know the full story, and so, he was ostracized by everyone who admired the two. Rumors spread on why he had done it, each more ridiculous than the last. Some say he was jealous of Itachi for having Izumi, so he killed Itachi to get him out of the way. When he did, Izumi didn't want him, so he killed her too. Another said he just snapped out of the blue. None of them correct. It made it worse that they accused his father of playing favorites, acquitting him of his crime just because he was his son. That is why he was slowly sinking back into his old pessimistic views. His hope for the world slowly reduced to nothingness. His will to live, carrying the fact that he killed his best friend, dwindled completely. There was no light in this world anymore. Not for him anyways. The lack of missions was making it worse. He had been taking them one after the other just to keep his mind busy with the added benefit of avoiding the hateful gazes he received every day. The world was laughing at him. Every chance it got, it kicked the shit out of him with no mercy. What did he do? Well, he didn't know what he could do yet. It hadn't gotten to the point in which he felt he had to do something. No, he would wait it out with a sliver of his previous naive hope that it may get better sometime soon. He just had to wait. In his bed is where he would do so. Staring at the white ceiling above him, watching as it melded seamlessly through the colors of the daylight, and eventually the moonlight, day after day. Sitting in his office rubbing his temples, Minato signed another document. The recent years weighing on his mind heavily. The stress of everyone everywhere begging him to do something about one thing or another was eating him alive. He didn't know who to listen to. The council was the worst as of recent. The latest tragedy of Itachi Uchiha's death was at the center of most of it, and consequently, so was his son. They demanded his head. Even as Minato explained that Naruto's action was within law, as Itachi was essentially a nuke ninja, they refused to hear it. They wanted vengeance for the loss of Konoha's #1 ninja. They wanted him to pay for his crime, which Minato adamantly refused. He would not kill his own son for something he would have done had he been the one to go. Minato knew for a fact he wouldn't have hesitated to end the young prodigy's life if Mito was in danger, or if he thought she was. Sadly, most of the requests for a trial came from his close friend Fugaku. The entire Uchiha clan was stricken with grief and they demanded he pay for his crime. Minato actually feared the outcome of the end of all of it. There were only a few ways it was bound to end. With either Naruto getting killed, or the Uchiha clan packing up and leaving Konoha for good, weakening them considerably. As a father, he wanted to protect his son as best he could, but as a Kage, the village always came first. It broke his heart, but if a threat such as that were to be issued, he would have to try his best and get the sentence of death reduced to possibly prison or exile. Neither of which he wanted. With Naruto racking up mission after mission as he had been the past few weeks, he'd possibly have something to argue his case of freedom for. Maybe they would see reasoning with the village's current lack of manpower. He doubted it. The world was at a moment of stasis. Not peace, but a great lack of major conflict that could possibly incite a war. It was calm. Hearing reports from both Captain Yosha and Inoichi gave him more to worry about. Now, he was finding out his son may not be stable. That was cause for concern as well. For a man as skilled as Naruto, being unstable could mean another Orochimaru case. A madman running loose among the elemental nations. No, he wouldn't believe it. His son was fine, all he needed was some sleep. As he thought that, a ball flew in through the window, emitting a purple gas that left the ANBU in the room falling from their spots. Minato jumped to his feet with his kunai in hand, staring at the figure that jumped through the window. He had a hood covering his face as he charged the blonde Hokage. They engaged in a brief taijutsu match before another squad of ANBU burst through the door. The hooded figure kicked Minato away, gaining some distance before charging towards the window. He threw an explosive tag at the roof above before jumping out. When he did, he peeked back inside at the blonde Hokage, who was surprised by the face beneath the cloak. It was his own son. Unfortunately, the ANBU within the room saw as well and gave the order to others that Naruto Namikaze has attacked the Hokage. With that, they pushed their way through the falling debris, intent on finding the blonde teen and arresting him. Minato was still shell-shocked at the turn of events. There was no covering this one up. He just couldn't believe Naruto would attack him so carelessly. He could have easily caught him just then, but his shock wouldn't let him move. He couldn't understand what had happened. Or maybe he could, but he just refused to believe it. Naruto remained staring at his ceiling, as he had done all day, when he suddenly heard someone quietly enter his home. As a trained ANBU operative, he heard it clearly and drew a kunai, readying it for whatever fool tried to attack him. He could hear multiple things in his house shifting or moving with someone's influence. Waiting around the corner, completely calm, he waited as whoever it was came rushing in. When they did, he ended their life with no hesitation until he saw that it was one of his own ANBU agents. A guy he knew, more specifically. Instantly, he dropped the kunai in his hands and fell to the ground, spewing out a string of no's in urgency. No, 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 hey, he said, putting pressure on the slash in his neck, trying to stop the blood from flowing out. His hand glowed green with medical chakra, but before he could heal the injury, he was tackled to the ground by a group of other ANBU agents. With his face pressed against the floor, he looked down to the end of the hall and perched in the window, staring back at him, was himself. His eyes grew considerably with the smirk he was given before the visage changed into some random civilian and jumped away, and he pushed his face down, muffling his cries to go after the real perp. He struggled more and more, just to get to a position where he could at least talk, but as soon as he did, the ANBU on his back delivered a chop to the back of his neck, putting him to sleep. His headband was removed from around his neck. 2 months later, his body slumped over on his knees in the middle of the room filled with people who hated him, and his father's saddened gaze upon him. Naruto stared blankly at the ground beneath his knees. The room sat in silence, awaiting the verdict they had all arrived to at long last. For the past 2 months, Naruto was being held in the ANBU prison as he made his own case to defend himself. When he was called before the council, he explained every assumption he arrived at, even re-explaining the situation involving Itachi's death. The council was split in their thinking. Most of the civilians were undeterred by his story. But the clan heads and higher-ups seemingly understood, if even a little. Understanding and forgiving were different things, as explained by Fugaku. When he explained what he believed happened the night he was being charged for, he told them of seeing 100 transformation Kazan fleeing the scene while he was being detained. The one thing he couldn't explain was the man's motive. The only possible answer he had was that the man was possibly intent on ruining his life. The council would not accept such a runaround excuse, so his only possible explanation was seen as unreliable. Now, they just waited for the inevitable sentencing. Minato stood to his feet, no attempt at masking the pain of his duty. Naruto Namikaze, for the crime of attempted murder against Yokage, and the murder of a fellow Konoha shinobi, you have been sentenced to life in prison. His voice grew softer and softer as he spoke. Even when all was said and done, the room remained completely silent. I am so sorry, son. The only sound now was the clanking of Naruto's shackles as he was being hauled off by 2 of the ANBU guards. This time, to the Rio prison. 1 month later. 1 month, one hellish month that fell into a new cycle that was far less than favorable. It couldn't have been helped, however, as the prison was run by his biggest fans, the Uchiha clan. With the testament of what happened the day of Itachi's death directly to Fugaku's face, he had hoped it would be enough to at least make peace, but the past few weeks told him otherwise. His first night there was the loneliest he had ever been. He wasn't placed with the other prisoners immediately. Instead, he was taken to one of the abandoned divisions in the lower levels. It was there that the guards felt he needed to be taught a lesson. Sure, he could have fought back and probably killed them, but he figured there was no point. It would do him no good anyways. They beat him severely for the first few days, taking turns venting their frustrations out and getting revenge for their fallen clan prodigy. His daily torture was only accented by the lack of proper treatment and bare essentials. He was given one very unfavorable meal a day, water twice a day, and a shower that could not be used. That was his cycle for the time being. When the guards had finished having their fun with the blonde, he was at last moved up to the regular prison levels. His first cellmate was a man who had a grudge against his father for his sentencing, as did more than a few others. In other words, after Naruto endured the beatings from the guards, he had thought they would stop. Of course, life had more jokes for him. His permanent fate of enduring more beating being one of them. They had their fun with him whenever they felt as though they wanted to hit something, and when staring at a wall was your main activity, you always wanted to hit something. The guards always turned a blind eye to the events, whether they be in the courtyard, the cafeteria, or the hallway. They would always stand aside and watch until his attacker got tired before bringing back order. For those who really hated him, they gave the prisoners the lower floor for the purpose of having fun for as long as they wished. It was down there that they attempted to kill him. It was down there that Naruto Namikaze finally lost it. While down there, one of the attackers got the idea to drown him in the water from the shower, knowing full well the issue that made the lower levels inaccessible. There was a reason the lower levels were no longer used. They ran on the same pipelines that were used by the old lab of the snake Sannin. Pipes that he used to dump his toxic chemicals before he fled. That day, there were hundreds of prisoners that died because of it. Sadly for Naruto, that wasn't the case for him. His Uzumaki blood seemed to allow him to fend off the internal effects it caused. But it did well in changing his appearance. Not to an extreme level, but it did dye the hair on his body blood red. In a stroke of irony, he looked as though he were born with the color just as his mother and sister. It was just another part in the series of bad events This one finally broke him. While the men stood around his broken form, watching him throw the blackened liquid off his body, they laughed. Thinking back to his favorite book that he was no longer able to read, he realized something. The book was completely right. Everything it said made perfect sense. The world around him was laughing at him. It was kicking dirt in his face and laughing its ass off. Everyone around him was intent on assisting. They were quick to notice him when he did something bad, but when he tried to play the hero and just be a morally correct person, he was forgotten about. No matter what he did, he was overlooked as if he belonged in non-existence. It was at that moment, as he kneeled on the floor with his skin burning, and black liquid still pouring out of his eyes, ears, mouth, and nose. He pushed his hands through his newly red hair, still covered in the murky black liquid, holding his hair to his head, and he laughed. He cackled like a man possessed, freezing the surrounding men almost instantly. They watched him laugh at absolute silence. One of them, who felt brave enough from kicking his ass all day, stepped up with the plan of delivering another kick to his face. When his leg came within range, Naruto grabbed his ankle in an iron grip, clamping down harder and harder. He was no longer laughing. With a violent jerk of his wrist, he broke the man's leg. The man's screaming is all that broke the silence of the barren prison chamber. The 4 remaining men got into fighting stances, seeing that he was finally planning on fighting back. Only one of them was smiling, as he was an ANBU agent himself, and felt that he could take him. The others weren't so sure, 2 of them barely reaching the rank of Chunin, and one of them barely making genin. Naruto stood up with his back to the group, not affected in the slightest by the man screaming bloody murder next to him, trying to crawl away. He was still casually wiping the black water off his body. Pulling a strand of hair down, he examined how blood-red it was. How he admired. "That is uncanny, ha 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 ha," he said with a gassed-out chuckle that did little to settle their nerves. The former ANBU commander was tired of the anticipation. Now was his best chance to attack. He leaped forward, intent on delivering a kick to his back. Naruto sidestepped the attack and grabbed the off-balanced man in a chokehold. Without a moment's hesitation, he snapped his neck with a nauseating cracking sound. When he dropped the body to the ground, the other 2 lost faith in their chances of defeating him. Their only chance was to make a run for the door to get the attention of a guard. When they took off running, Naruto slowly turned around and began walking their way. Passing by the whimpering man with the freshly broken leg, he stepped on his injured appendage, inciting another hell-curdling scream from him. "Don't go too far now. I'll be right back, ha 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 ha." The 2 men made it to the metal door and began beating on it repeatedly, begging for someone to open the door. The guard that was usually at the top of the stairs wasn't there this time. Turning around, they saw the red-haired teen, still partially covered in the black water, casually strolling their way. In urgency, they began hitting it harder and harder, trying to break the door down. Naruto strolled towards the 2 in apparent amusement. A small grin plastered on his lips and an intense look in his eyes. Watching the 2 men fight for their lives was amusing him in some sick way. Even more so when they turned to face him. Resolve in their eyes and a will to live, they charged, one after the other, and died in the same order. With those 2 handled, he casually walked back to the last man standing, well, crawling. The man was still on the floor with his head tucked against his forearms and his body trembling. Naruto grabbed the man by his broken leg and swung him around until his body crashed into one of the cell doors. His fit of screaming tuned up to another level completely. Naruto squatted down to gaze into his eyes. In doing so, the man tried to throw a swing at him. Naruto caught his fist with his left hand and with his right, jabbed him in the bicep. When that appendage dropped lifeless, the man pulled the shank he was hiding up his left sleeve and slashed at him. Naruto easily disarmed him, disabling that arm as well. The man regretted his actions almost immediately as he watched the blonde twirl it in his hands, examining its quality. "Huh, you brought me a toy," he said, taking the blade in his hand. When he suddenly stopped, the man looked him in the eye with more fear than he was expecting. Naruto's visage became softer, almost sincere. "What's wrong? You were laughing at me just a moment ago," he said. "You don't look good with a frown, let me fix that." Ha 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 ha. Grabbing the man by his hair, he stuck the blade in his mouth and gave him a partial Glasgow smile. "There, now even in your grave, you'll be smiling." With that, he slit his throat and watched the blood pour out in a steady stream. Then, he sat there in the middle of his heinous crime and waited patiently for the guards to return to 5 dead prisoners and a new man, laughing at the ironic turn of events. Marking this day as the day he finally lost his mind, and lost himself. The day he simply laughed back. There was no longer a Naruto Namikaze. That boy was gone. Now, all that remained was no one. 1 year later, on the 3rd floor of the Konoha maximum security prison, 3 men struggled down the hall, passing cage after cage of men who earned a rightful place within the establishment. One a skinny brown-haired man dressed in his orange jumpsuit, the other 2 Uchiha guards pushing him along, struggling the whole way. The prisoner looked absolutely terrified, begging the guards desperately to not force him to go wherever they were taking him. He did everything he could to prevent his movement. Dropping down to the ground, pushing his feet against the rails and indentions of the walls on the way by. The men within their cells that watched him pass by chuckled and threw out words of false encouragement that only increased his fear. "Oh, come on! Please!" he yelled, trying his hardest to push back against the two men. "Cammy! Please! I beg you!" His pleas fell on deaf ears as they dragged him away, towards the very last cell that had 3 empty cells next to it. The man even begged to be put into one of those, but they had their orders and stuck to them, throwing him into the cell and shutting him in. The man quickly got to his feet and ran for the cage, trying to throw it open before the guard locked it. "No! Please!" he said, grabbing onto the bars as they walked away. Soon, he was left there, left to hear nothing but the chatter of the other prisoners in the distance. He refused to turn around as fear racked his entire body. From behind him, he could hear tapping. Following the advice given to him before he was brought in, he tried not to make a single sound. The shaking of his lip was allowing the smallest of whimpers to escape his mouth. That's what he focused on for the time being. His heart skipped a beat when he heard a whistle that was clearly intended to get his attention. His mind was ripping itself in half trying to weigh his odds. If he didn't turn around, he'd be disrespecting him, but if he did, well, they had only heard stories. Figuring he'd have to face his fears at some point, he turned around timidly. The cell had the basic layout the rest of them did, with a bunk bed off to the right side, a toilet sitting in the back left corner, a sink against the back wall, and a small table and chairs bolted to the floor in the middle. In the seat facing him, his new red-headed cellmate sat, holding a deck of cards that he tapped on the table portentously in rhythms of 3. A very intense look in his eye that was directed solely at the skinny man standing in front of him, stalking him as if he were the most interesting thing to him at that moment. "Hello," he called out lowly. "Looks like we're cellmates now." The man tried his hardest to clench his trembling lip as tight as he could. His hands were held protectively against his chest, and his eyes refused to meet the steely gaze of the redhead. Forcing himself to reply, he whispered out. Seemed like it his tone was riddled with so much fear, he berated himself for even trying. The redhead smiled at him. "Hey, would you like to be my friend?" The council chamber was once again filled to the brim with people that at this point were becoming very annoyed with the case they were discussing, the case of the sentencing of Naruto Namake's. His enraged family brought the case up every month since their return with new arguments and questions. Minato continued bringing the case to the floor as it was his decision which trials they discussed each time they got together. With their society being a militaristic dictatorship, they could not speak out against his ruling, excluding special cases such as a shinobi's imprisonment, which was the current issue. Sitting in the middle of the room along a table, directly in front of the main council members, was Kushina, Menma, and Mito along with Jiraiya. All there to plead the case or give a testament. "All I'm saying is that it doesn't make sense," Kushina said, pulling out cards that she had written facts about the case on. "I mean, Naruto claimed it was the working of 100 transformation Kazan that posed as him. So, why was he not searched for when you received this information?" Danzo Shimura was heading the meeting with the agreeance of Minato, who understood the case was too personal for him to rule favorably. That information wasn't received until the morning after the attack. By that time, he would have been nearing the outskirts of the Land of Fire. "So you just decided not to even entertain the idea that he could have been telling the truth?" she asked incredulously. "Don't be foolish, of course we did. Namake's claim for a possible motive was too ridiculous to be taken," he replied. At this point, Jiraiya stood up. "I agree, but I'd argue the kid was too emotionally distressed to give an accurate motive." "So you're saying you have one?" asked Hamura from his side. "Actually, I do. You see, the death of Itachi Uchiha is linked to this. Kazan posed as his sister to get him to fight Itachi. He was working with Orochimaru at the time." He let that ring in the air for a few moments. Danzo rushed him to elaborate. "What is your point, Jiraiya? It's Orochimaru!" Jiraiya yelled out as if the case was completely obvious. "I mean, come on. Do you not know his motives for what he does? And what would that motive be?" Fugaka asked from his spot. "He wants him. He wants to make him a monster, because he saw his potential," he answered. Danzo seemed completely unconvinced. "We are not here to base motives off of speculation. Regardless if we accepted your ridiculous guess of intention, Naruto Namake's has solidified his position within prison. He has killed an active Konoha shinobi and 28 men while incarcerated, including 3 guards. We argue self-defense," Kushina replied instantly. Hayate-san was within Naruto's residency unlawfully, to Naruto's knowledge, and as a shinobi, he was within his rights to kill all of them. He even expressed the fact that he killed him by mistake. Before Danzo could argue his point, she continued. "Naruto himself was found beaten and chemically tortured by the guards who discovered the scene." "That means nothing," Danzo replied. "Inoichi-san, would you please explain to us your last psychological evaluation with the prisoner in question?" he said, directing everyone's attention to the man. Inoichi shifted in his seat a little, feeling uneasy about incriminating the son of his friends. My evaluation with Naruto Namake's was quite informative," he said, coughing into his hand. "He was a very unhinged, if I were to describe it. His topics bounced around sporadically. His personality shifted completely from when I had last spoken to him. Do not beat around the bush, Inoichi, Danzo demanded. Tell them what you told me, they need to hear it. Inoichi cursed the man. He looked down into the eyes of the man's family in sympathy. Naruto Namikaze showed heavy signs of psychopathy when we talked. He spoke of his intentions of what he wished to do if he were ever released, describing things along the lines of mass murder and inciting wars. Kushina and the others couldn't believe it. It wasn't true. What do you mean by signs of psychopathy? Jiraiya asked. When evaluating someone, we begin with basic questions used to determine their emotional state. From their answers, it is decided if they are in need of the test. Naruto's answers were completely unrelated to the questions being asked. So, I began to ask him more hypothetical questions to see how he reacted to them. His answers were circuitous to say the least. Inoichi explained. So you marked him insane because he was answered your questions indirectly? Jiraiya asked in a deadpan tone. Well, it's a bit more complicated than that, he said. The questions are used to get them ticking. Make them feel as though they're not in control. When they feel as though they are losing it, they will either react violently, or use some other motive to return it to their favor. Naruto is quite slick with his words. He led me into a conversation that left himself explaining what he was talking about, as I did not understand. In other words, he shifted the conversation towards a subject only he knew about, making himself the only person with words on the subject, putting himself in control. That doesn't prove anything, Mito yelled out, finally joining the conversation. Naruto and I is just smart. He is indeed, Inoichi continued. Which is why he knew he could shift the conversation towards his own favor. Aside from the mental battle we had, his physical tendencies were unbalanced as well. What? Did he shake his leg too fast? Jiraiya joked. Inoichi brushed off the comment and continued on. No, it was more subtle things. For one, he only blinked once. The family just stared at him incredulously, visually asking if he was serious. Our conversation was 2 hours long. He clarified. Look, Kushina, I am terribly sorry for what is happening to your family at the moment, but in my opinion, I have never seen a look like the one Naruto has in his eyes. He's not the same boy he was when you left. If you continue in your journey to get him released, and you succeed, I fear for us all. Kushina's expression was downtrodden. She stared at the table beneath her hands, thinking over his words. No words of reply to the statement. He was trying to demonize her son. What could she say? There is no need to fear, Inoichi, Danzo said, looking down on the group in the center of the room. Naruto Namikaze will never leave that prison. Actually, he will, said Fugaku, surprising everyone. They all looked at him in questioning. Was he siding with Kushina? Naruto has become too dangerous to keep within the prison. He is responsible for talking 7 of his previous cellmates and neighboring inmates into committing suicide. It has gotten to the point in which we have had to clear out 6 of the cells next to his to prevent it from happening further. With the overcrowding state the prison is in currently, you can see how that is a problem. In our need to place more than a few inmates in solitary confinement, we have come to the point of threatening to move them to his cell to keep them in line. Since the death of one of the guards, however, the others are afraid to go near him. So where else do you propose we put him? Minato asked, finally joining the conversation. Fugaku thought it over. Well, if we decide him a lost cause, he can be sent to Hozuki Castle, he said, receiving a shake of Minato's head. Or, he could be moved to the asylum in the care of Inoichi. It's a less stressful environment with the same containment tactics, he suggested. All the cells are isolated and he'd receive the proper treatment he needs. Minato looked down and thought. It was a lot better than prison, but if Naruto were a danger to the prisoners, then would it be wise to stick him in place where they were granted virtually more freedom? I will leave the decision up to Inoichi, he said, looking over to the man. Inoichi looked down and thought. I have a haunting feeling that I should probably refuse, but I suppose it would be best, he said, nodding his head. Danzo interrupted. For it to be a possibility, there must be restrictions as he is still imprisoned, he said. Minato nodded begrudgingly as he had given him authority over the case. There will be no interaction between Namikaze and the other occupants. He will not be allowed recreational time as he is not a patient, he is a prisoner. Might I suggest a 2-hour psychological session as well? Total isolation could cause more harm and aggression than is recommended for someone of Naruto's skills, Inoichi said. The 2-hour session is approved. If at all possible, get him mentally sane enough to be moved back to the prison. Regarding his skills, they will not be an issue. He has a complex seal blocking off his chakra made for prisoner containment by the Night Aim himself. It has stood strong for years, Danzo said. Inoichi nodded, blowing out a sigh with clear worry riddling his tone. Hold on, Fugaku said. Who will you have undergo his evaluations? Well, I have a staff full of capable psychologists, most of which were trained by me personally. They are all highly capable, he answered. Fugaku gave him a look that did nothing to settle his nerves. I'd advise putting only your best. Preferably yourself, he said, giving no further information. Finally tired of holding their tongues, Kushina spoke up. Hang on, don't we get a say in this? she asked. I am afraid not, Danzo said. Your argument today was pushing for your son's release. That is not, and will not ever happen. Furthermore, Naruto Namikaze will have no visitors, other than those granted special clearance, as he is still a prisoner of capital offense. He will have the same lack of laws he would have had within the prison, he said with finality that enraged the redhead beyond belief. That is the final result of this meeting, Hokage-sama. Minato stared at the top edge of his podium with a disappointed look as well. He was of course unsatisfied with the verdict, but was already plotting strong points for the next argument that was most likely going to take place next month. He was the Hokage, so he decided on whatever case he chose to, no matter how many times he chose to do so. If that is all, everyone is dismissed, he said, standing up himself. Kushina was packing the papers in various forms she brought back into the folder, glaring at Danzo, who looked right back at her apathetically. This isn't over, she warned him as her and the others headed towards the exit. Danzo just snorted at her remark. I'm sure. 3 hours later, the Namikaze house was subdued in utter silence. Mito, Menma, Jiraiya, and Kakashi sat around the table listening to the aggressive cooking taking place in the kitchen. Mito and Menma still silently arguing as to not disturb the others, stuck in the thought of their defeat. Jiraiya was thinking of things they could use for the next case but was drawing complete blanks. Everything he came up with somehow found a way to counter itself, or was seen as invalid due to some of the things already discussed. This was extremely important to him, and the others could tell. Although they would like to believe it was all for Naruto, it wasn't. He loved the boy, but this was also a chance to finally get Konoha to actively search for and apprehend his old teammate, or even kill. He's known Orochimaru for years, and if he's learned one thing, it's that he is a very patient person. No matter how long he had to wait, he would see his plans come to fruition, and with a mind like his, Jiraiya feared what that could mean. Minato walked into the silence, knowing full well he was expecting it. He hung his cloak up and made his way through the dining room, greeting everyone on the way by. He entered the kitchen to see Kushina chopping vegetables so aggressively that it was cutting into the wood of the cutting board. He walked up next to her, getting her attention. We made progress. Chopping even harder, she replied instantly. Progress, she mocked. What fucking progress? We got him sent to a house full of wackos and sick people? How great. That's not what I meant, Minato said, looking down in thought. We've gotten the backing of a few more of the clan heads. What good is that now that you put that?